All right, hey everybody, it's Matt here. Welcome back to my channel. And today I have something that I've never done before, but I think it's a cool idea. And I'm here with my two musical pals, Nick and Vanessa, and we're going to be talking about the English rock band XTC. And I mentioned them a lot in the past because they're one of my favorite bands. And so what we've done is we've listened to the main 12. They also have another band called Dukes of Stratosphere, but I didn't cover those because I really have not listened to those albums very much. I think they're pretty cool, but we're just doing the main 12 under XTC. And I guess I'll just give a little rundown of XTC for anybody. I'm not going to give like a full history, but I'll just say, so they're formed in the early 70s, and they have a really cool career. Like they start out doing like punk and power pop, and then they go on to new wave, and then they have like a psychedelic phase, and then at the last leg of their career, they're really into like lush, orchestral balladry, which is really cool. And yeah, I think we've talked about this last night, but I think they've only gotten more popular. I think the last couple years they've been pretty unpopular, and now their stature has risen a little bit. I hear people talking about them a lot more, and they're such a fantastic band and so influential that it's really cool to see. But yeah, so throughout doing this video, they've become like one of my favorite bands. I guess I'll let you guys introduce yourselves because you both run music-centric spaces on the net, and I think I should give you a spotlight to promote what you do. So who wants to go first? I feel like this is classroom show and tell or something. Nick,
well,
you want to talk about?
I'm on the right, so.
Okay, Vanessa, you want to go?
Sure. I have a YouTube channel called Let It Vee. I do some different music stuff, year rankings, lists, artist rankings, just really whatever comes to mind. I listen to a lot of music in general, so just kind of filter that into my content. And yeah.
Cool. What about you, Nick? You have a blog called Critter Jams that I've been reading for some time. It's very good.
That's pretty cool. That's funny because when I was your age, I used to be into like music blogs too, and like contacting some of those guys, and what do you think of this and this? So that
music
is pretty
nerd
neat.
circle of life.
Exactly. I've been doing that for like 11 years. It's supposed to be a weekly blog. Now it's more like a monthly. But in addition to that, I've been getting into like DJing and doing radio shows and stuff locally here in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. So I'm pretty active doing that. But yeah, other than that, I got 2 kids, so my time is somewhat limited, but I still try to get into new music when I can. Mostly through like people like you kind of like recommend things to me directly. Like that's sort of how I've been, discovering new things.
I think I've only recommended you one album formally.
Yeah, but there's a lot of people like you out there,
Okay.
You just say like, hey, what do you think of this and this? And usually it's just like, oh, I've never heard of that. And it's always something very cool.
You always absorb things through osmosis, which is such a good, and this is such like a healthy, like being a music nerd is such like a troubleless thing to get into. It's like really healthy. So I'm glad that we are all kind of part of that ilk. But anyway, are you done, or can we get into the?
I was wondering if maybe we want to go around and tell you like, how did you get into this band?
Okay.
If you think that'd be good.
All right, I guess I'll start. I'm sorry, I realize I just said, "Are you done?" It sounded very terse. I'm sorry about that. So I think the way that I got into XTC was, I'm sort of a big nerd, and I'm into all the not all. There's actually some geek rock stuff that I don't like, but I've always loved They Might Be Giants and all the geeky nerdy bands like Neil Cicierega and all that. But I didn't go the way that you go with that music, where you kind of listen to like the more like terminally online kind of strands of that kind of music. You can kind of go back. You can either go that route, or you can go backward onto like these quirky arty new wave bands like XTC, Talking Heads, Devo, all that. And I think the first album that I heard from XTC was Drums and Wires, which I have a funny story. I think the first time I heard it, I was walking to an Islanders game before my birthday. And I just have that memory. And I remember thinking like, oh, this band is really good. Like it's kind of like Oingo Boingo, but a little bit less annoying. I think that's the problem I have with Oingo Boingo is they're a little too strident for my taste. But I really like Drums and Wires. Yeah, so I was like, okay, now I wanted to do a video with Vanessa. So I thought, like, what's a good discography we can do? Oh, we can do XTC because they have a good, well-rounded discography. And as I'm listening to these albums, like, they've risen so much in stature. Like, if they're not my favorite band, they're got to be at least in my top 5 favorite bands because they really have something for everybody. And I don't know, I just love Andy. He's like one of my favorite guys ever. Like, he's so funny and such a brilliant songwriter. And him and Andy and Colin are like that. XTC kind of diluted down to Andy and Colin toward the end of it, but they're such a good pair of songwriters. So that's how I got into them.
Well, I would say that I first heard Making Plans for Nigel when I was a teenager, so back around 2000 or so, just on like a satellite radio station, and thought it was a great song, loved it, and of course I knew Senses Working Overtime, Dear God, but didn't really explore their albums until later, probably in the last 10 years, and just slowly I've heard most of them. I didn't hear a lot of the ones after Skylarking until we did this, but other than that, I knew most of these. So I like them a good bit, but I feel like I have a feeling just from what you guys have been saying, I've been keeping my opinions close to my chest, but I probably have a little more of the hot takes. So
hey, that's okay. I mean, yeah, it's all right. I mean, I probably have some takes that you guys won't agree with, but that's all right. How about you, Nick? How did you get in XTC?
Well, it was the first time I'd ever heard of the band was because that They Might Be Giants song, XTC versus Adam Ant. It's funny because that's one of the few songs by them I really don't like. It's kind of like tuneless and bland to me in a way that their stuff usually isn't. But
I like that
it's
one.
also like kind of the best song of theirs to me because that's how I heard of the band. And later, I think I was probably like 16, 17. I was just like doinking around online in some computer class. Happened upon some like music review websites. And, I saw the name XTC at the bottom of it. And I'm like, oh, I've heard of that band. They Might Be Giants are into them. And like, oh, I wonder if they're any good. And I think it was Mark Prindle's site. I don't know if you heard of it. He's like a music reviewer from back in the day.
Oh,
and he was
yeah,
like, yeah, they are really good. And he said that Drums and Wires is the best album. So I downloaded that one. And I think by like the second track, I was really into it. And then like, I remember the next year I'd gotten a job working for the public utilities. And I think that whole summer I listened to pretty much nothing but them while I was driving their little van around, much to the annoyance of everyone else, I think. But that was kind of when I'd gotten way into them. And recently, because of like the pandemic, I've been getting into like collecting records, which has given me a chance to like revisit all this stuff that I used to be into and, sort of reevaluate it. And I think that has really led me to getting into them again because, when you get into them when you're young, like you only really have so much life experience to draw from. And now that, I'm married, I have kids, I've, kind of been through a lot, and you sort of see the journey that, specifically that Andy Partridge has been on, like, because he's become like a father himself, and he's been through different relationships, and he's sort of chewed up and spat out by the industry, and re-listening to all that with like that context in mind, I think it kind of means more now that I'm older than it did. Like you kind of understand where he's coming from, because back when I first got into him, I was a little frustrated that like they didn't make more records like Black Sea or whatever, Like, and that was kind of the way I felt about a lot of bands. Like, why didn't you do more like, when you were really energetic but like you kind of get it as you get older. And I think it really makes you appreciate, I'd say like the guy's honesty, about life in a way that, especially when you listen to him chronologically and you see how quickly they change, like that kind of happens in your own life too. So
yeah,
a good time for this.
yeah, and it's actually, thank you, Nick, for a great segue, because we're about to start talking about their first album, White Music. And I guess I'll just talk about my notes on this. So like you said, White Music, as in this is their debut, 1978. They released 2 albums this year, and they're kind of the same ilk. White Music and Go To, I would say Go To is a little bit more atmospheric and like dub oriented than White Music is. White Music is it's very adolescent. It's very like, it's got a lot of speedy punk rock and a lot of like dissonant weirdness and power pop on it. And the album is pretty short. I think it's only like 35 minutes, so it's a really good listen. You can put it on when like you've drinking a lot of coffee and like you want to dance around your room. That's kind of the ideal mode to listen to White Music in. And the album is kind of light on substance, and I feel like whenever the album ends, I'm always kind of like, oh, that's it, because the songs are so kind of frictionless and they're over so fast. But I do love a lot of the songs on it, especially the A side, which is from Radios in Motion, which they kick the door down with their discography with this amazing power pop song, this amazing opener. And then I think side A ends on the weird cover of All Along the Watchtower. And that's like that song to that cover is like one of my favorite moments in their discography. I think it just hammers it really well. And I mean, overall, I think that the album is kind of amateurish. I mean, you kind of get the sense that the band don't exactly know what they're doing a lot of the time, and that they can't play their instruments super well. And like Andy in particular does not know how to sing very well yet. He's honking all over the place. He's barking. He's screaming. But I do think that's a cool vocal approach for this album because it fits the music. And also another thing I wanted to say about this album is Barry Andrews, he left after Go To, I believe. He's on keyboard, and it's really interesting how his keyboard licks are adding so much to these songs, where they kind of become riffs in and of themselves, like the doinking around on Neon Shuffle, or the way that he'll kind of like crank the overdrive on the keyboards and they'll get super duper distorted, and it just gives it a really unique texture, like for the first album. And I would say that it's a lot of fun, but it's not the best. I mean, I would rank it as one of my least favorites from them, but I would say it doesn't really hold a candle to anything they've done past Go To. But it's a nice collection of decent dance punk and the new wave and post punk, and I enjoy it quite a bit. So yeah, I'm gonna give this one a 3 out of 5. And I guess as we talk more about the songs, I'll talk more about the songs. But overall, it's a good debut for them. 3 out of 5.
So yeah, I have some notes too. I vary a little bit, I think. I mean, similar sentiment, maybe a higher score, but I think that Radios in Motion is a great opener. Opens with a lot of punky energy, and I'm not sure, like, if I didn't know it was them, that I would necessarily recognize it as them if I knew their later material. So that's interesting. But it is a super catchy song. Crosswires kind of has a quirky, nervy post-punk energy, and it kind of reminds me of Devo. Like, I think a lot of this album draws upon the time period a lot, and like you said, they don't totally have their own identity yet, so you can really hear that in it. This is pop, catchier, new wave, kind of reminds me of a less polished version of the Cars. So that's one thing I noticed. A lot of these songs, it reminded me of other people a little bit. But I did find it interesting that while the first 3 songs are relatively different stylistically, they all flow together pretty well. So that's cool. Statue of Liberty also reminded me a bit of The Clash, and that's also a strong song.
That's my favorite.
So far, good one. So far, I just think the biggest critique would be, like you said, that I don't hear a distinct identity for the band yet. But the songs are so good, I don't really mind that much. I still think they're really strong songs. The All Along the Watchtower cover is not my favorite song here, but I don't think it's remotely as bad as it's often made out to be. I'm actually diving this band with a ton of other music fans, and a lot of people really hate the All Along the Watchtower cover, so I don't agree with that. But I'm not sure that the stuttery vocal breakdowns totally work for me, but I do think it has a cool groove, and Colin's bass work is great. The second side, it's got some catchy tunes. I'm Bugged is pretty fun. The keyboard synth sound reminds me of a bug, which gives kind of an early indication of things they do later with sounds and imagery in their songs. And the last few songs are all catchy and enjoyable. And I think they close out the album well. But this is the sound of a band figuring out who they are, and before they figured out their own sound. At the same time, I still think it's really enjoyable, and there are many glimmers of their potential in some of these songs. It's cool to see how they start out and how they would go to evolve from here. So yeah, it's not their best, but I would have it higher, I think. But again, my list is going to be not typical, I don't think. So I have this at 4 stars, actually, but a very weak one.
A very weak 4 stars. Okay, yeah. That was some really cool, especially what you said about the, like you said, I'm bugged, like the keyboard sounds kind of are that of a bug. They do that on English Settlement because Andy has like synesthesia. So a lot of what he does is dictated by like the sounds of, or no, the looks of things or the sounds of things or the evocativeness of an image to him. So it's cool that you brought that up. I was going to mention that even on white music, he's doing that synesthesic aesthetic, which is we'll see a lot later. Nick, what do you think about white music? I think I saw you give this one a really good review back in the day. Yeah, I was 20 years old when you rated it.
And yeah, so I had to pull it up because I had to remind myself what songs are actually on this, because there's an EP they released at the same time. I don't know if it became before this one, but I believe the CD like has this album and the EP all together, and they're all kind of similar. But yeah, I mean, I think first of all, I want to second what both of you said. Radio's Emotions, great song. I really love it because there's a shout out to Milwaukee in there, which, you know, to hear a band from Swindon reference a place in Wisconsin, which is I have Wisconsin on my mug right here. Like, that's pretty cool to me.
Very cool.
But what really kind of drew me to that album is that there's, you know, I think that when you're young, which I don't know how old they were like in their early 20s, like I think that a lot of people are like kind of confrontational when they like make music, when they make art in a way. Like they're not necessarily looking to be like great, but they're looking to get a reaction out of people, you know? Like I think that's what a lot of like the punk movement was all about, you know, and you mentioned like Devo, especially in their early years, like they were good, but they were also really like confrontational. Like they were trying to get a reaction out of people. Like when they performed.
They're very transgressive.
Yeah, they were. And, you know, they really had to sort of clean it up when they got on an actual label. Because they were really that far out there. And that's something that I appreciate about like the early XTC stuff is that, like, I don't know if I'd say it's like transgressive the way Devo is. Like maybe that cover of All Along the Watchtower, like they kind of seem to set out to destroy that song in a way. Like you mentioned, a lot of people dislike it. Like I think that's what they were going for. Like they kind of saw a sacred cow and they wanted to butcher it in a way by like, you know, putting this big stupid bass line in it that doesn't really fit with the song and turning it into, you know, like it's barely even a cover, really. Like it uses the same lyrics, but I think that's pretty cool. And I think that's like, it sort of shows their personality in a way that like, this is what they do, you know? Like I think you're right that they didn't really have much of an identity yet, but like they had a lot of energy. They, you know, I think they wanted to look for a way to express themselves, and you know, they kind of wound up looking like a bunch of goofballs on it because that's kind of who they were. Like they sort of fit in with the punk movement, but they weren't really like, they were maybe like far too normal, like kind of geeky in a way to really fit in with that. And that's how you sort of get something like this. As far as like my favorite songs, I think like Neon Shuffle is a favorite of mine. Newtown Animal. Into the Atom Age. Like some of these songs are just like stupidly catchy in a way that like I really appreciate. That for all the album shortcomings, like it does really well in what it sets out to do, I think. So I gave it a 4. Like I think when I reviewed it on Rate Your Music, I gave it a 4.5. But I've tried to like give them lower ratings, so I like the band so much that like I'm gonna have to settle on a 4 for this one. So yeah, that's what I think. I think it's really good. And what I really also appreciate about it is that it's almost like a genre unto itself in a way, because like I'm sure you've heard that term Zolo before, which is like, it's one of those words that gets thrown around to like describe music that no one can like really define like what it means. It's just like this sort of wacky sensibility that you know when you hear it. Like early Devo's got it, like Oingo Boingo, P Model, if you ever heard of them. Their first definitely like this. But like it's always like White Music is the one album that's like whatever Zolo is, this is it, you know, for better or worse.
I really like that. I really like that term, not only because it's so fun to say, but it encapsulates so much of what I was into when I was 13 and 14, you know, just off the wall, new wave and post-punk that makes you want to literally bounce off of the wall. It's so springy and like out of its gourd. But I think I gave it the lowest rating. It's because I was trying really hard to be objective. And I do like a lot. I do like the A side a lot. And This Is Pop is great. Statue of Liberty is like, I think I consider that one of the best songs Andy's ever written because it's so tight, like, and it's so catchy. There's like, it's so airtight. There's like no room for any messing around. It's like such a straightforward power pop song. It's so good, so catchy. And Neon Shuffle. Crosswires kind of is so dissonant and like springy. It reminds me of Cardiacs. I think you're gonna find that Cardiacs were into quite the early milieu of XTC, because I can hear that in Crosswires, and there's a song called Do What You Do that's like a minute long. I think it's track 4, but there's a guitar solo on that I was listening to it. I was like, I forgot what I was listening to for a moment, and I thought that it was Cardiacs that I was listening to. So I was like, wow, I mean, these guys have to have been inspired by early XTC.
I can see that. It's funny because Crosswires, that could have been a song that was like written and recorded in like 2 hours, you know? I feel like that's one of their most influential songs, like in a way, because I feel like that a lot of later bands heard that and like drew from it. It doesn't sound like any of their other stuff either. But like, I remember the first time I heard it, I was like, I've never heard a song that sounds like this before, you know?
And I think it's a Colin song, which is really weird because he writes the more poppy, consonant kind of alternative songs, but this one is like so off the grid. It's like I don't even know what they're doing, but it works because it's so catchy. So I can't
say for sure, but I feel like that was almost Colin's way of making fun of Andy Partridge.
Maybe a little bit.
It sounds like to me, like he's like, "Oh, this is what you do. This is what it sounds like to us," you know?
Yeah.
So it's like a parody of the record on the record in a way, like as track number 2.
It's Radios in Motion into Crosswires has got to be the most. It just gives you whiplash. It's like Radios in Motion, Crosswires comes on, you're like, what the hell am I listening to? But I think that's a good state to be in when you're listening to White Music. But over my least favorites are I'll Set Myself on Fire, which is another Colin song. This song has always been annoying and tuneless to me in a way that is not catchy, and I just don't like it. That's actually my only least favorite, because a lot of these songs blend together. It's good. Dandy little album, very fun. Listen to it if you want to dance all around and bounce off of your wall. That's my recommendation. So the next album we have is Go To. This was released in the same year as White Music. I think it's released a couple of months afterward. And I'm not gonna hide my opinion about this album. I think this is their worst album, and I think that that's the common consensus. I think over a lot of music fans, is this is their weakest. And I wouldn't say that it's bad, but I do think that it's their most uninspired and forgettable. I mean, I think that the songs are longer and they're more substantive than the songs on White Music. and they're colored with more interesting instrumentation. Like on the second half, you have like these pianos that come in that are distorted. They give the songs a unique color that are not really on white music, which is pretty much, you know, organ, guitar, bass, drums, and Andy singing. And I don't know. I mean, I think I put it as my least favorite because the proof is in the pudding, because I really never go back to listen to this album besides 3 songs. I really love Battery Brides. That's such a cool song. It's got such a cool atmosphere to it. It's kind of dub, you know. And there's a song on here called Super Tough, which is like the first inkling of their dub reggae influence that they'll really do a lot of on Drums and Wires, the next album that you can really hear. And yeah, Colin's got some great songs like Crowded Room and The Rhythm. I think it's Crowded Room that has the same chord progression as the Nirvana song About a Girl. And I read that Kurt Cobain was into XTC, so I'm wondering if he bit that consciously or if that was like some kind of kryptonesic thing, like he ripped it off by accident. The Rhythm is also another good power pop one. Yeah, but I don't know. I'm going to have to call it their worst album because I just think it's forgettable, and it's not as, I would argue it's not as catchy or as inviting or instantaneous as white music. It kind of reminds me of a bunch of leftovers, like a bunch of undercooked leftovers from white music that I don't really go back to. The influence from krautrock and dub is cool, and it's cool that they're kind of getting away from the speedy punk and everything. But overall, I'm going to have to give it, this is my least favorite. I'm going to give it a 2.5 out of 5. I feel really bad giving an XTC album that low of a rating, but I have to give it a 2.5 out of 5. And my least favorites on this album are Mechanic Dancing, which I know, Nick, you like that one, but I find it annoying and without a good melody. And I'm also going to say My Weapon, which Barry Andrews wrote, and I can't tell if the lyrics on this one are trying to be satirical, but they have not aged well, I'll tell you that much. So, yeah, those are my least favorites, and I'm going to give this one a 2.5 out of 5. This is my least favorite. So I'm curious to see what you guys think of it, because it has a lot of mixed opinions. Like, a lot of people are champions of it, and a lot of people are like, this is their least good.
I guess I kind of fall in neither camp. It's not my least favorite, but it's in the lower end. I think it's like third from the bottom, I'd say. But I do like Mechanic Dancing. I think that's a catchy start to the album and probably one of the more memorable songs. I do think that some of it feels a bit more like XTC that we hear in the next couple albums in some ways. But at the same time, a lot of the album does kind of run together, and it isn't as memorable as white music. I'm not big on Barry Andrews songs at all. I'm kind of glad this is the only instance we get of them, because I don't really like either of them, and I don't really think they fit into the album very well. And I think, like I said, I think it starts pretty strong, but I don't always love the directions they're going in here. And I think that they're working more towards developing their own sound, but it's not quite there yet. It's still very much like a transitional record. And that's what it is. It's a formative record more than a great one. And I definitely prefer white music quite a bit. But I'm still going to go with a light 3.5 because, like, I still like listening to it when it's on. It's pretty consistent. It just doesn't have the highs that white music has. It's just more kind of all on a similar level, aside from those Barry Andrews songs that I don't like. So, yeah, and then I don't really have a lot to say about it either. That's the one thing too. But there are a couple less.
That's kind of the problem with it, is that it is kind of forgettable. There's not really a lot to say about these songs other than they're okay. You know, a couple good tracks. What do you think, Nick? I haven't seen you talk about this one, so I'm excited to hear what you think.
Oh, well, I'm going to disappoint you. I don't really have much to say about it. It's like you two mentioned, like there isn't really a whole lot. What it reminds me of a little bit, like the first two Sparks records, where like they were clearly onto something with those, but you can see them like kind of branch out on certain tracks in ways that don't really work out. And like I feel like this is sort of what happened to them, is that they had a sound, they knew they had to evolve in some way, so they kind of evolved in like a bunch of directions at once, and that without really committing to anything. Like, I've mentioned I really like the first two songs, Mechanic Dancing, which I think was like inspired by Kraftwerk, the robots, I think. And then like Battery Brides. But both of those songs are not like anything really else in their catalog, you know? Like, you know, you mentioned there's like the dub influence, like they sort of went in that direction for a little bit, but like it's mostly just them like trying stuff. And you do kind of get the sense that they didn't really have enough material to like fill out the whole album. You know, and especially like in the second side, like I'm kind of looking at, I did re-listen to this recently. Like there's still a few songs in this that I cannot remember how they go. But yeah, I mean, it's got some good ones. Like I like the song Red a lot because it's, you know, it's got so energetic. What's the other one? Jumping Gomorrah is kind of fun. The rhythm is catchy, you know, so there's some decent stuff on it. I think the coolest thing about it is probably like the sleeve, which I'm sure you've seen. Like, and mine is cool. It opens from both ends. This was a $1 record that went on sale in 2003. And one cool thing about it is that the inner sleeve has a map of Swindon on it.
Oh, wow, that's awesome.
You can probably see this on Discogs, but this is, I guess, made by Colin Moulding. It has, the place he used to work, the place he went to school, the place he lost his virginity is on here. There's also the meeting place. So if you ever wondered what the song from Skylarking is about, it's on this map. The meeting place is here. So that to me is the coolest thing about it. I gave it a 3 because, you know, like Vanessa mentioned, like when it's on, it's not that bad of a record. It's just there's not really a reason to like go back and listen to it, you know? No. Like, it doesn't have like any particularly great song on it.
Yeah. And I had 2 things I wanted to say, and then we'll go on to Drums and Wires, which is a total classic and one of my favorite XTC, one of my favorite albums ever, I think. But we'll get onto that. So I remember I was listening to Andy on a podcast, and he told a cool story about how Hipgnosis designed the sleeve. But he told the story about how they actually, so XTC like bust up to Hipgnosis's offices one day, like on a rainy Swindon day, and like the A&R guy like lays out a bunch of sleeves on the floor, and they're like, okay, the album's gonna come out soon, you gotta pick at least one sleeve. And Andy and Colin and, you know, all of them, they're kind of looking at each other like, you know, we'll pick one. They don't really like any of them. And so they come out of the room, and then as they're leaving, they see a thing emblazoned on the wall that is basically the cover of Go 2, but it was, I forget the story, but it was pretty much mocking like record labels, but Hipgnosis had that in their offices, and it caught Andy's eye as they were walking out of the studio, and then he pretty much had like a eureka moment, like, that's it, that should be the cover of the album. And then they basically just copied what was in the office of Hipgnosis's office and made it the sleeve. And it is a really bold sleeve. Like Nick talks about how you know, XTC weren't the most transgressive. That's a pretty transgressive thing to put on your album cover in like 1978, just so text like you can barely read it. I think that's pretty funny.
It's kind of obnoxious too, though, you know? Like, I think they have one Achilles heel. Like, sometimes this band is a little too clever for its own good. And, like, this is the sort of thing, like, the people who don't like the band, like, that's the sort of thing they reference. Like, they're just, like, kind of smartasses in a way. Yeah.
And I was going to say something else. I forgot what I was going to say. I guess it wasn't that important. Okay. We'll go on to Drums and Wires. And I said that this was one of my favorite XTC albums. And I mean, this was the first one that I loved, so maybe there's a bit of a bias. But I think that I've listened to it so much that I think that I've overcome the bias a little bit. And I think that this is one of those albums. It's new wave, and I'd say that it's weird in that I've never heard an album that's more representative of its respective genre. Do you know what I mean? Like, this is like new wave through and through, and it's arguably like one of the best albums of its kind. I mean, I would say this has got to be my favorite new wave album, other than I think Vanessa's kid just walked in the room. That's nice. I was gonna say how that kind of threw me for a loop. I was on a tangent. But yeah, so the first Devo album and Drums and Wires, I consider that like the pinnacle of new wave, and it's so emblematic of the genre and like all the tenets of the genre. I think it's really fantastic, and I think I'd say it's arguably their most immediate album. It's got a lot of skanking guitars, and it's got to be their most nerdy album. I mean, even Andy sounds like he hasn't hit puberty yet. His vocals are like very high pitched, and they're very yelpy, and they're jerky, and it's just got great melodies, and it's got a it's got a high strung atmosphere. But there are songs on it specifically toward the middle, like Millions and That Is the Way, where they slow things down a bit, and they play around with tape delay and reverb in a really cool way, that's kind of dub influenced. And I think this album has just a smorgasbord of things going for it. I mean, it's got hooky weirdness like Roads Girl the Globe and Day In Day Out, which both kind of remind me of a poppier post-punk take on like Captain Beefheart or something. And you have like pure pop like Nigel, which is one of the best songs ever written. Colin wrote that, and it's like the inexplicable mega hit because it's just so good. 10 Feet Tall is kind of their first jangle pop song. When You're Near Me, I Have Difficulty is kind of brings back that Zolo energy, but it's more poppy. And then you have like the more manic, kind of paranoid, freak out songs like Real by Real and Complicated Game. And I think Complicated Game is their first, or I'll give Nigel a 10 out of 10, but Nigel and Complicated Game are like two of their first 10 out of 10 songs. So this is the album where they kind of prove that they're a really fantastic band and that they're sophisticated songwriters and they're very good at what they do. Don't get me wrong, this does still have its fair share of a I don't know what you want to call quirky or annoying moments. It's probably their most consistently off the wall. I mean, if you want to talk about white music and Drums and Wires are, I think, two of the quirkiest albums in their catalog. But I'd say the songwriting more than makes up for it, and it's a real classic. And yeah, I mean, I'm going to give it a 4.5 out of 5. I think it's fantastic. I'd say my least favorite songs on here are Outside World, which is I think it's kind of outdated by this point. I don't really want to hear them doing any more speedy punk because I think they've proven that they're more sophisticated than that. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but it doesn't really do much for me. And Helicopter, which is a lot of fun, but I don't know if I would call it like a really great song or anything. It's just a lot of fun to listen to. So yeah, I'm gonna give this a 4.5 out of 5. Very good album. And Vanessa has it right in back of her, so maybe you should show us the sleeve because it's got some cool art. It's got an iconic cover too.
Yeah, it's
I'm gonna CD there too. I mostly just put it for display, but
yeah,
I got a copy right here too. If you don't want to take it down, this is it.
Very cool.
Yeah,
that's very glossy.
Yeah, so I had an old one. They just like reissued this. I had an old one, but it was so warped that it kept skipping. I tried the thing where you throw it in the oven for a little bit. It didn't work. So now it's actually on my wall over here, and I got a new copy. So
that'll cook it.
Yeah. Apparently that works, but it does,
Yeah, I wouldn't risk it. Well,
I was already shaped like this, so.
Ouch. Yeah, it's the first one. Well, actually, I bought that in Black Sea at the same time. I lucked into finding them super cheap one time several years ago, but anyway. So yeah, it opens really strong, of course, with Making Plans for Nigel. That's one thing I find that overall they really excel at opening albums with a strong song most of the time for me. And it was the first song I ever heard by them, of course. And it was the song that I immediately loved. And even if I didn't explore their music further till many years after. I think that Helicopter keeps the momentum going and things sound smoother on the album right off the bat while still retaining some personality. I definitely noticed that the songwriting is stronger overall, especially from Go To. When You're Near Me, I Have Difficulty as a highlight. It's catchy and charming. I really like the way that Colin and Andy's songs play off of each other on the first side. even if the second side is dominated by Andy's songs, which is a bit of a pattern. There's a nice contrast between their songs without them clashing, and a true beginning of a dynamic, I think. And that's what I really like when we hear more of that than the domination, but I'll get into that later. I think 10 Feet Tall is another great call-in tune. And I think side 2 starts off a bit less immediate than the first half of the album, but still enjoyable. And I think that Outside World brings a nice burst of fun, catchy energy, while Scissor Man keeps it going. And overall, I think this is a great album and where they fully realize their sound for the first time. The first 2 albums had their share of highlights and cool moments, but this is where everything fully comes together for the band, and you don't have any of those more awkward moments that we saw in the first 2 albums. And I feel like they sound distinctly like XTC for the first time here. And that's an exciting transition to hear, especially when you go through chronologically. So I'm going to go with 4.5 as well. And it's my second favorite XTC album overall. So.
Cool. What do you think, Nick? I know you have 2 copies of it, so you must like it quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can make an argument that this is like where the band really begins. You know, like the first 2 XTC records, like they could have been called something else, like they could have had a different band name, and then they became XTC when Dave Gregory came on board, which to me, like that's the big difference. Like you don't have Barry Andrews anymore. Like for whatever he did, David Gregory is more like he's like a musician in a way, you know, like he has that. He's kind of like Andy Summers in a way, where he doesn't write a lot of songs, but he's so good at like texturing his guitars, and he's got probably a lot of cool pedals and stuff. Like there's a lot of good guitar noises on this album, and it really speaks to like why he became such an in-demand session guy. Like not only through XTC's career, but even after. Like I don't know if you've been following like what he's been up to after, but he plays in like a lot of progressive rock bands. Like, so he's just like that kind of skill. And I think that makes a huge difference, especially when you like listen to the demos on, I think it's called like Coat of Many Cupboards. There's like a 4 CD demo collection where you can hear a lot of these songs when they're just like an acoustic guitar, and you can really hear like what they added to the mix and like how full they made it sound. But also like they're maturing a lot as songwriters. Like the songs are getting, I'd say, fuller, you know, there's more ideas on there. They haven't like quite lost the Zolo sensibility. Like one thing I think is really cool is that Primus covered 2 songs from this album, Making Plans for Nigel and Scissor Man. And you can almost argue that like Scissor Man is like the basis of the Primus sound in a way. So like
kind of.
It's really cool because like you mentioned, like, oh, this is like the ultimate new wave record. But it also like happened to influence some stuff that's really out there, which I think is pretty cool. So personally, my highlights, Making Plans for Nigel, obviously. I do like Helicopter a lot because it's got that, sort of like what you mentioned with I'm Bugged. Like it does sound like the rotor, the propeller of a helicopter, like the way the bass just kind of bounces up and down.
And there's also a sound effect of a helicopter's engine running that fades in day out.
Yeah, that's. I think that's like some drum machine making that noise. That on Andy Partridge's dub album, he uses that, like those effects a lot. But I think the reason I probably don't like this album as much as you two, mostly because I think it's like a little long in the tooth. Like I think that some of the songs go on a little long, like longer than they need to. Specifically like Millions, Rhodes Girdle Globe, like those songs to me are a little dirgy. Like, and I'm just kind of like looking for things to complain about because I like the band so much. But like, I think it could have been a little tighter. Not counting Complicated Game, which I think is awesome, like front to end. Also, that song "That Is the Way" probably could have been left off the album. So one thing that kind of oh, you do?
Yeah, I mean, it's got the cool Pink Floyd-y trumpet break, and I was like, oh, a trumpet! I didn't know XTC used trumpet. Part. Yeah.
No, one thing that does kind of irritate me about it, somewhere in there's like a 7-inch that came with this album that has the songs. It has Limelight and one other song, but it does
Life
not
Begins
have.
At the Hop.
No, it doesn't have that one.
It doesn't.
That's the song that I think is missing from the album. That like there's some editions of this which do have Life Begins with the Hop on it, but mine does not. And I think the official track listing does not have it. Now, if I had that song, I would give it a 4.5. But as it is, I'll give it a 4.
Oh,
that was always my favorite song on the CD.
Yeah, that's like one of Colin's, like, okay, Colin might be a songwriting genius kind of songs, because that's one of the really good power pop ones. It could have been on the main album. I would probably replace it with Real by Real, which is one of my least favorite on here. And that it's got, I mean, I don't know if that song really accomplishes anything other than being, I don't know. It really doesn't do anything for me, so I would probably replace Real by Real with Life Begins at the Hop if I was in charge of the track list. But alas, I'm not, and it's great as it is. It's 12 songs. It's very good, and yeah, some of the songs do get a little long, like, you know, Rose Girdle the Globe. But I have never heard anything like that song. I don't know what they were going for. It's like a Viking death chant with like touches of Beefheart and like the pop group. It's very strange. I don't know, but I like it. It's got a catchy hook.
That's true. I mean, I think the thing with Life Begins with the Hop actually is, you know, these guys are very cognizant about like the sequencing on their albums. And I think like it sounds to me like a leadoff track, and like that wouldn't necessarily fit anywhere else on the album. But like Making Plans for Nigel is also that kind of track. Like I don't think that would work anywhere else on the album. So like maybe they're like, well, we can't have 2 leadoff tracks. Back then you could still have non-album singles do well. So, oh well.
Yeah, so I think we can all agree that this is a very, very strong album. But yeah, so now we're going to be talking about Black Sea. And just because I put you guys through that for 20 minutes, I'm going to let one of you talk about Black Sea instead of me starting it off. So who wants to go first? Nick, I think this is one of your favorites, right?
Oh, absolutely it is. Yeah, so again, I have it right here. It's Vanessa has on the wall behind me. This is also like a new copy because the original one I had was pretty trashed, and the album is that good that I figured I'd get one of the reissues. So to me, like this one, it's similar Drums and Wires, but it like goes a bit further. Like it sounds a lot more confident to me. I think that like the guitar playing is really good. The melodies are really great. It's got like a very powerful sound to it that, you know, Drums and Wires also had, but this one like kind of leans into it. I think a lot of that comes down to the production that I believe, I'm going to look this up quick, but I think Hugh Pagham, is that the guy's name?
He's like I think he produces it.
I think he's also on Drums and Wires, but this one I think is, this album and I think the surrounding ones have that like trademark big 80s production sound, which I think this guy in particular was pretty good at it. I know he also did like some of the Police's albums. So like this to me sounds like a big budget, you know, like a real production. And I think that they're sort of like peaking as songwriters on this one. Like, you know, the first 2 songs, Respectable Street and Generals and Majors, both like incredible singles. There's like a lot of more kind of jammy tracks on it. I think some of the songs, like you can hear them get like so good that the songs are almost like obnoxiously catchy. You know, like Love at First Sight, Burning with Optimism's Flames, Sergeant Rock, which is like almost too obnoxious. But yeah, I mean, they're really sort of at the peak of their powers, like at least in this incarnation. And of course, like the last song, Travels in, was it Nylon?
Neolon.
Is that a real word? Or is that something Andy made up?
I know that in the song, he breaks it up into like 5 syllables.
Oh, that's what he does. I think I really dig that as a closer too. Like it's a real like thundering, you know, just lengthy, I don't know what you call it. Like I complain about some songs on Drums and Wires being too dirgy, but like this I think is what they were aiming for. So yeah, pretty much everything on this one works. I do also think it's like a little long. Some of the songs I think could have been shortened. So I'm only giving it a 4.5, but that's mostly out of respect to like how good the other albums are. So yeah, I dig this one.
Okay, I guess I will I have some good notes on Black Sea. This is my second favorite XTC album, and it's the one of two albums that I'm giving a 10 out of 10. And hey, I know that's like big words, but the weird thing was when I was listening to these albums, Black Sea did not grab me at all. And I remember the first time I listened to it, or maybe the second time, I was like, it's fine. I mean, it's got a couple of good songs. I remember not liking Love at First Sight in particular because I thought that it sounded repetitive and obnoxious. But as I listened to it more, I realized that this is one of their only flawless albums where I would not change a thing about it. I wouldn't change the production sounds. I wouldn't change any songs in the track list. And I just think it's them at like the height of their powers. I think that it's so airtight and filled to the brim with phenomenal songs. I mean, it's 11 tracks, so there's no real room for Andy, being overindulgent. There's no room for like Colin filler, like on the later albums, which I mean are welcome, but it's not the first thing I put on when I want to listen to this band. And it just has like this nautical political air about it that I find really cool. And it sounds exactly like the cover looks, which I think it's a perfect marriage between the cover art and the music on it. And speaking of the music, I think this is their only album where they're really working perfectly as a band and not like the Andy and Colin show, if you know what I mean. Like I feel like the drums are so expansive and huge, but they sound really good. Like they don't sound like the 80s Phil Collins gated reverb thing. They're just washed in like these giant echo chambers. And the guitars, they're all interlocking and they're all brilliantly composed. And I think that what makes this album so good is that they sound united on this album in a way that I don't think they sound united on other albums. Like this is a real band studio effort, and I think it really pays off. And the songs are just so incredibly good. Like on Respectable Street, that's such a good opener when it starts off with like the faux vinyl that's like you almost can't hear it, and you have to like it's the They Might Be Giants Birdhouse in Your Soul trick where the start of the song is volumetrically very quiet and you got to turn it way up and then it gets very loud. And there's also there's a lot of like ahead of its time stuff on it, like the glitchy electronic drum loops that are on Living Through Another Cuba. That could have been on like a Sweet Trip album in like 2003. And like the Travels in Neon, like 20 years later, every 90s goth and industrial band would be taking its cues from something from the sounds of that song. It's so I genuinely could not believe that. What is this, 1980? It sounds like something from like the early 2000s. The way that it's put together, that's one of my favorite tracks they've ever done. And I would say my favorite song from this album is "Paper and Iron," which I don't see a lot of people talking about. But there's this hook in it where I think it's like it's really wall to wall hooks this album. So Andy's writing his best vocal melodies up to this point. They're really functioning as a band very well. And yeah, I mean, I just think it's a perfect album. It's amazing. I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5. And this is my number 2 if we were to rank them, which I guess me and Nick, or maybe I'm the only one that's going to do that. I think I forgot to tell you guys. But yeah, so I'm going to give this a 5 out of 5. Very good. Perfect.
I mean, it definitely has the perfect opening, right? Because like right when that first guitar riff of Respectable Street kicks in, like I remember hearing that for the first time and thinking like, yeah, I'm really gonna like this band,
Yeah. What about you, Vanessa? What do you think?
I like it a lot. I think it would probably be around my 3rd favorite. So yeah, agree. I think it opens strong, of course, with Respectable Street and Generals and Majors, the 2 singles, like you both said. And despite starting with singles, which sometimes can make an album feel less exciting if the other songs don't live up to them, I think this album continues strongly with the energetic living through another Cuba. And it is a bit repetitive lyrically, but I feel like there's enough happening instrumentally to keep it interesting. Love at First Sight keeps things going in a strong direction, and cool sounding guitar solo on Rocket from a Bottle. And I think that No Language in Our Lungs is a standout as well. So I think side one is all very strong. Side two opens with Towers of London, which is another single, but also another great catchy song. Burning with Optimism's Flames is a highlight for me on the second side, and I really like the melody of the chorus and how it works with the rest of the song. Also, Sergeant Rock is going to help me as well. That's a great one. And overall, I think this album, I like it a lot. I don't think there are any bad songs or iffy moments, and like you all kind of said most of the gist of it already, but one thing I do miss is a bit of the overt contrast between Andy and Colin's songs that you get on Drums and Wires, as Colin only gets 2 songs on this album. So that's the one minor criticism I would have. And that's just being a little nitpicky. I think it's a great set of songs and an album that keeps your interest throughout the entire runtime, and one that really grows on you over time, like you alluded to before. So for me, it's a strong 4 stars on the very high side of that rating.
Yeah, I might be the only one who... No, I think this is like regarded as, if not their best album, like one of their best, I think. I just love every second of it. It's got this fiery, like apocalyptic air to it that they haven't done up until this point, and it's just very exciting for me to listen to. And I think like, yeah, the flow of the tracks themselves, I just think it's a perfect album. So, got to give it a 5 out of 5.
When I was trying to get people into this band, this was the album that I picked. Like, when I was 18, trying to get my friends in XTC, this was the one I would give them. Yeah. And I had by far the most success with this, getting them into the band than anything else. So
it's probably their most immediately cool sounding album. Like, you put this on, people are like, oh, I like this, Mm-hmm. So next up, this is their 5th album, English Settlement, and this is their first double album. And I'm not gonna lie, I do have my reservations about this album. I do really like it. I think it's great. I've listened to it quite a lot. But I do have my reservations about it. I think that overall, I don't like the production, and I know that, this is going to be like a nerdy, I know I've seen memes, like people making fun of like, oh, I don't like the production, but I do think that the production does hinder this album quite a bit, because at least the way that I'm hearing it, I have a digital copy, and I'm just listening to it the way that it is, like, remastered on YouTube, but it sounds very, like, dim and washed out and distant and kind of quiet, and I don't know if that's the best atmosphere that these songs should take. I mean, I do think that it was kind of quietly influential on bands like, Cocktail Twins and Slow Dive. Like, I can kind of hear remnants of their sound in songs like Jason and the Argonauts, especially toward the end, where everything is covered in reverb and flange and everything sounds very psychedelic. But overall, I do wish that the production was a little less washy and like soupy. But other than that, I mean, I think that it's their first double album, so there's room. Oh, believe me, there's a lot of room for messing around, especially on side C. You have stuff like It's Nearly Africa and Melt the Guns, which are not, I don't know if I'd call them very good songs. Melt the Guns is okay. And I think this is a controversial opinion. I don't care for English Roundabout or Snowman. So it's kind of a bad thing to not like the closer of an album. I just don't like Snowman. I find it forgettable. But the first half has some of their best ever material. I like Senses Working Overtime is a perfect pop song from Andy. Jason and the Argonauts, if this is not his best song, it's got to be in his top 5 for me. I love the interlocking guitar lines all over the song, and I love the lyrical narrative of it. And yeah, I mean, the first 4 songs are pretty much perfect. I love No Thugs, and also I'm gonna give a shout out to All of a Sudden It's Too Late, which is like this kind of faux heal the world environmental like ballad, but it's really well done. It's like one of their saddest songs, I think. Fly on the Wall is another cool one. That's what I was talking about before with how they get the keyboards and like the timbre of the song to sound like a fly. I think that's really cool, like how they do that, and it's like something only XTC really knows how to do. Other than that, yeah, I love Ball and Chain. That's a Colin song. I love No Thugs. That kind of brings back some of the militant punkiness of Black Sea, the last album. Overall, I think that it's a great album that's marred by a little too much messing around, dim production, and feeling like some of these songs are just unfinished and unfocused. Like, I kind of get the sense that the band doesn't really know what to do with them after they hit the 3-minute mark, especially on the last half. Yeah, but overall, I'm going to give it a 4.5 out of 5. It's an excellent album. And the whole album kind of has this atmosphere of like a dismal day in Swindon. Whenever I listen to English Settlement, that's where I'm transported to, more than any other XTC album. So that's kind of neat in that. But yeah, I'm going to give it a 4.5 out of 5, even though I do think that it has a lot of flaws. But that's okay. It's still a great album.
We going back to the original order?
Yeah. I think I messed it up a little bit. You can okay. Go.
So yeah.
In the middle there.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not my favorite either, but I do still like it a lot. I think it opens strong again with Runaways. It serves as a scene setter for their evolved sound on this album. I think they're going into a different direction, obviously, and it's very atmospheric. Ball and Chain feels more familiar and bouncy to some of the earlier albums. Senses Working Overtime, of course, is one of their most well-known songs for a reason. It's a lovely, catchy song. Jason and the Argonauts is another classic that I think complements the previous song very well, lush and atmospheric as well. It's very catchy. And I like the biting attitude on No Thugs in Our House. Less high on Yacht Dance, but it does sound lovely. But at this point, side 2 of the first disc is a bit of a lull for me, even if it's overall good. Both side 2 and side 1 of disc 2 are purely Andy Partridge songs. And like I said earlier, I think the band benefits from having the variety of both Andy and Colin's songs together. This isn't meant to discount Andy as a songwriter at all, but I just like that combination and that tension between their songs over all Andy in a row like this. But these sides are both pleasant listens, and I like the songs. I just feel I'm missing that creative tension, even if I like this more ambitious vision in the production overall. Knuckle Down is a standout in this part of the album for me, and a nice change of pace. I like that the last side returns to having some of Colin's songs, and Fly on the Wall opens it well with the bouncy energy and fly-like sounds, like you said. Andy's Down in a Cockpit matches that energy well. And I think that this side is a good way to close out the album. But overall, I appreciate this expansion of their sound, and I think it points the way to the next era of their career, where they become more studio-focused and expansive in their arrangements. On one hand, I think it could have been a tighter single album, but on the other, I'm not entirely sure what exactly I would cut from it either. So I don't know. It's still a very good double album, but those 2 middle sides hold it back for me from being truly great. So it's a 4-star for me as well.
Yeah, and it's a good point that you said that this album is really pretty eclectic. Like, it's some of the most eclectic stuff I've ever done. Like, you have world beat stuff on It's Nearly Africa, which is pretty fun, but you kind of wonder, should these guys from Swindon be doing a song like this even in 1982? You have Melt the Guns, which is like, I don't even know what you would call Melt the Guns. It's like post-punk, but it's like also Viking music. I don't even know what you would call that. But there's a good amount of ska on the last side, and it's pretty eclectic. So it's exciting to hear them try different styles. Because I don't really think of XTC as like a genre hopping band, but they definitely go through their phases. So Nick, on to you. What do you think of English Settlement? I see you have the vinyl.
That's right. Yeah, just checking to see what songs on what side. I mean, I think it's kind of interesting because this is the same thing I was kind of like getting on them on Go To, where it's like they're expanding out in all these different directions and not really knowing where they want to go. Like they do that on this album as well, but I think they're like way better songwriters by this point. So a lot of it actually works. Like I think this is like the key album in their catalog because, so you mentioned that you thought Black Sea is like a perfect album, right? So like if they had continued down that path, you'd think it would only be diminishing returns from there, right? Like they couldn't like keep making that album. Like they'd done it so well. So that I think they maybe felt they had to like branch out and sort of like, I'm trying to think of like what was going on with like Peter Gabriel and all those guys. I think they were kind of following suit. Like, I know like the Police were kind of branching out too and doing like, some of the world beat stuff for better or for worse. So this album, like, I agree that not everything really works. I think side 3 does have some weak moments, but like even the songs that aren't really good, like are at least kind of infectious in a way. Like Melt the Guns is like, it's obnoxious, but like, it's not like boring,
It's got a good vocal hook though when Andy's like,
yeah.
Better than pure, affecting the pure, or whatever it is. It's pretty catchy.
And he's really kind of feeling himself on this record, I think.
Yeah.
And I think that like you can hear him get like more comfortable with himself in a way. But yeah, I think that like the whole first record is like pretty much perfect. I dig Yacht Dance a lot. I think that's a really pretty song. Senses Working Overtime, as you mentioned, is like kind of stupidly perfect. Like even hearing someone count to 5 gets that song in my head. It's either that or Mambo Number 5, depending on how they do it. But it's like, and even like, I don't know how much like sports you watch, but like even on sporting broadcasts, they'll reference this song whenever like someone gets to 5 of something. Like every once in a while, like someone will make a reference. Like it's just that memorable, I think.
Yeah, because it's like 3 perfect pop songs smashed together. I mean, literally, that's how Andy describes writing it.
I mean, it kind of is, and it's also like such an optimist song. Like that's the thing that I really sort of appreciate about like this record in particular is that there's such a full spectrum of emotions on it. Like I think Andy is still like kind of in his like Valium phase, I guess, where he's sort of like off the wall and bonkers, but he's also like maturing as a songwriter, and I think that comes through on a lot of this. Whereas like Colin's the one who's more like sort of downtrodden, except for on what is it, English Roundabout? That's like which is a really great ska song, by the way. We did one at the bar that I DJ at. We had like a ska set, and I played that song as part of it. And that was when some old timers in the crowd were really like, "Oh yeah, like I know what this is." Like, "Oh, that's really awesome." So yeah, the one song I don't like is Leisure. I think that's it's kind of annoying on purpose, I think, in a way that doesn't really work for me.
I like that one. It grew on me. I think it's a good.
Really do like that song.
It's a good Britpop tune.
Yeah, I think my issue with it is that if you're following like the B-sides that came out around this time, like there were some really good songs that didn't make the album. There's one called Tissue Tigers that I believe was written around this time that I think is like one of Andy's best songs, and it could have been on this album, and it was not. So I'm going to give it a 4.5 because like I know it's not as tight as the last 2 albums, but like I think the high points are so good on it. And I think like just the development, like I really appreciate the way they developed on this album. Like I think they kind of made the leap a lot of similar bands were trying to do, but like they tried and didn't quite get there. Like I think that they really did like reach another level on this album. And it's also like I just mentioned, like Black Sea is the one that you would introduce someone to first. But like, I think if you really want to get the full story, what XTC was about, like this album, I think front to back kind of says it all. So it's pretty important for that reason as well. And also like, it's got a really iconic cover, I think.
Yeah.
Like,
that's actually that's a mural in Swindon I saw.
Yeah, I've seen the actual thing. I think on one of the XTC Facebook groups, someone's like, "This exists." Like,
yeah. So yeah, after this, so we have 3 amazing albums in a row, and then we have Mummer, which I don't have a lot to say about it. I do think it is a bit of a minor stopgap in their discography. Originally, I had it at number. I had White Music above Mummer. I don't think White Music is better than Mummer. I think Mummer is more mature. I think it has better songs. I think that there's actually pretty great songs on it, especially the first four tracks. Beating of Hearts, Farm Boy's Wages, Wonderland. Wonderland's a Colin song, which kind of, Nick, you'll get this reference. It kind of sounds like Japanese art pop, like kind of a Kiko Yano kind of vibes, because it's just
Wonderland?
done so well. Huh?
Wonderland?
Yeah.
I can hear that.
Yeah.
Maybe that steady, slow beat to it that's got that. I probably know exactly what Akiko Yano songs you're thinking about too.
Yeah. So it's
she
got
totally cover that.
Yeah, I think she should. I shared it to the City Pop subreddit, got ignored, but hey, if you like City Pop, you got to check out that song. Great Fire is another one that I like. Memory of a Name, Lady Bird is cool, and I think my problem with this album is obviously some of the material is just mediocre. Like on the last track, Funk Papa Roll, which that's got to be one of my least favorite XTC songs, and I think it closes the album so anticlimactically, and I just think the main tune of it is just very bad. I just do not like that song. Other than that, I mean, people kind of say that this is like the embryonic version of Skylarking, and I would have to disagree. It does have the pastoral folk pop vibe to it, that kind of chamber sound. But I think this album is a great deal more like apocalyptic and infernal sounding than Skylarking, which is very sunny. It's very optimistic. It's very light and cheery, kind of. I think Mummer is a lot more off the grid, like emotionally. I think it's more of a nefarious listen. It's got kind of this dark underbelly to it. And it is cool, and I think it does have some great stuff. It's got a kind of an anxious sound to it. But stuff like Funk Papa Roll and Human Alchemy and Me in the Wind, I would never put those songs on, and that's like almost half the album right there, because it's 10 songs, it's so short. And yeah, but I do think it's a decent album. It's one of my least favorites, and even then, it's still very pretty accomplished. You know, if like a lesser band did this, you'd call it one of their best albums, but because it's XTC, it's one of their weakest, at least in my eyes. So I'm going to give this a 3.5 out of 5. Great first 4 songs, a couple good, 1 or 2 good songs toward the end, and then a bunch of what I would call filler, not so great songs. Vanessa, what do you think?
So this is actually one that I didn't know before we started this dive. It's one of the 5 that were new to me. So the first time I listened to it, it did seem a bit inconsistent, and I thought there were some really great songs and some that didn't work as well, like you said. And I do find overall, I respond less to their more cluttered sounding songs generally. But I did think that it sounded kind of out of its time period, like not like 1983, just kind of like XTC in any time. So that was kind of cool. But it did grow on me over time when I went back to it. So I think I like that timeless quality to it. I think that this Beating Heart is a strong opener. Once again, Colin's Wonderland continues things with this nice breezy vibe. I guess I could see kind of a city pop connection in some ways. It's an example of where the layered production serves the song really well to almost build a world within the song. Life on a Farm Boy's Wages, of course, is a highlight. It's a fabulous choice for a single and an earworm, and it perfectly encapsulates a rural vibe in the best way. I think that Great Fire has an interesting push and pull element to it, a dark and light element that I think is really interesting. Deliver Us from the Elements closes outside one, and while on the surface it feels like a lot is going on, it does suit that elemental theme of this album well, and ultimately I think it works. Human Alchemy opens side 2 and has been consistently my least favorite of the songs on the album. It has a sound that does not appeal to me. I think kind of is overproduced, and I don't like it very much. I think it's overdone. And that's the kind of sound that I don't respond too well with them, and that you'll see that more in the future. Thankfully, I think that things get a little more on track with Lady Bird. even though it kind of sounds like it's on a completely different album from the previous song. I like the jazzy vibe of it, especially in the bass playing. Collins in Loving Memory of a Name is pretty good, not necessarily a standout, but catchy enough. And I like that Me and the Wind has a neat windy effect. Getting to know this album better definitely reveals the overall strength and world building with the music here, and that enhances this album in a lot of ways for me. Funk Pop and Roll closes things out, and I think it's fun. I don't mind it. I think it closes things out well. I've seen this album referred to as a grower, and I really see that element the more I've gotten to know it. It's one that a lot of friends of mine didn't like at first and ended up really loving near the end of their time with XTC. So I kind of agree with that. Aside from that one song I'm not that big on, I think this actually works really well together to create a really concise and immersive album that effectively evokes a rural vibe. But yeah, I don't think that it's really comparable to Skylarking like some people do. I see what you're saying there. The songs really reveal themselves as you spend more time with it. And like I said earlier, it feels more timeless than you'd think for an album from 1983, especially. And there's plenty of flourishes that could really date it, but I don't think that it does. So it's still 4 stars for me, though.
All right.
Nick?
Well, yeah, I think it's interesting that you mentioned that at the end, because this is where, to me, they sort of like step out of time in a way. Because, and I don't know if it's because of the producer they had for like the last 3 albums, but all 3 of their previous albums, like, all do kind of sound very 80s. Like, they're timeless, but like you can, in the production effects, like the different like phasers and stuff that they use, like you can recognize it as being very 80s. Whereas this album like kind of seems to step out of time. Like, not for certain keyboards, you wouldn't be able to figure out what year this was. I do think it's interesting because like this is where XTC sort of fell off the earth in a way. Because I think I'm sure you're aware, like, that Andy Partridge, like, I think his wife had like thrown away all his Valium, and he sort of had a panic attack and retired from touring abruptly. I think a lot of people had assumed he had died, like, at this time. So like being able to pull some of these songs out whilst going through all that turmoil, because I think like this is where the band got to be forever in debt, you know. Especially because like this album did not sell very well. Like, I don't think.
No.
I feel like the singles were total flops. So like the fact that it's as good as it is with all the turmoil that was going on, I think is pretty incredible. Like, but I still think it's like one of their weaker ones. Like you mentioned, the first side is really great. The first 3 songs, I mean, Great Fire is good too, but like the first 3 are total classic. Love on a Farm Boy's Wages, I think, is probably one of the sweetest songs I've ever heard in my life. Like, it's so, and it's kind of stunning because, like, you know, you think of Andy Partridge, if you know him, like, if you read the stuff that he's written and you read like a lot of his lyrics, like, he seems like a very sarcastic guy who it's hard to like take seriously and it's hard to take at face value. And then he like comes out with a song like this. It's like so sweet. You kind of fall in love with it. Like, I think that's really cool. But yeah, overall, like, yeah, you two, I think, hit it. It's for a lesser band, this would be like a more remarkable album. For them, it's just kind of like them sort of treading water, figuring out like what direction they really want to go in. Like, I don't think it's like a proto Skylarking, but I think it kind of points the way to the things they'd be doing later on. And it's also interesting that if you have the CD version of this, there are, I think, 6 bonus tracks like plopped in the middle of it between side 1 and side 2. And those songs, I think some of those are actually pretty good. Like, they're more pop oriented than the stuff on this album. So like their songwriting is still pretty top notch, but a lot of it didn't end up on this album.
So, yeah, I would tend to agree. It's very good. It's grown on me a lot, but it's not one of my favorites. It's got to be toward the bottom of my list. And so the next thing that they do is the Big Express, which comes out in 1984. And this is kind of a pseudo concept album, not really in the lyrics, but more of the general tone and the sonic color of the songs, because this is like a concept album sonically about the industrial life of living in Swindon. I think Andy has kind of described it as that. And, it's kind of filled with these cheap twinkling keyboards. They kind of sound like, a lot of bands sounded like this around the time with all these cheap kind of toy like Casios, and I think I saw a funny quote where Andy said that he balked at people calling this the Lindrum album, because he said that there's no Lindrum really anywhere on the album. It's just that the drum sounds are so crudely over processed that it sounds like a drum machine. And there is a lot of thwacky, like weird drums that are going on. There's a lot of bells and whistles that are spinning around the stereo space, which kind of does give it this cool industrial vibe that sounds like a train, like, like on the track rattling, up and down, which is pretty cool. It fits the music. But I think this is seen as one of their lesser albums, but I think it's actually one of their easiest listens. Like when I was listening to it, I mean, I kind of felt like everything went down really smoothly, at least in my eyes. It's filled with enjoyable, stuff. I mean, you got like 80s cheese, like, on All You Pretty Girls, which is a great song, and it's very catchy, but it's one that I don't want to ever hear again, because it's one of those obnoxiously catchy songs where it's like the obnoxiousness supersedes how catchy it is, if that makes any sense. And there's a song called You Are the Wish You Are I Had, which sounds like early 90s Cure, which I'm not into at all. It's kind of grossly chirpy. But, I mean, you have a pretty great effort, if you ignore those songs, and maybe Rain of Blows, which is another noisy one. But this has some of their best material, I think, like on This World Over. That is a gorgeous song. That's probably one of Andy's best. It's probably I put it in his top 10 best songs, at least on the XTC studio albums. I love that song. And Wake Up, Colin, that's first-rate material from Colin. It kind of starts off sounding like Black Sea, but then it has this, like, the children's choir comes in, and everything gets really washed out and, like, shoegazy. And that's, like, one of the coolest moments on this album for me. And I also want to give a shout-out to Train Running Low on Soul Coal. This is one of the most bizarre closers I've ever heard to an album. It just keeps picking up the pace, and you have Andy imitating like a train's call and like braying like a donkey. And I don't know, I really find that so fun and such an unexpected way to end this album. And it ends it off really, really well. And yeah, but other than that, I mean, those are my least favorites. Pretty Girls, Wish You Are I Had, and Rain of Blows. And it's got a cool industrial, like, synth pop sound, and it's got kind of a cheesy new wave sound to it as well. And some of the songs do come off as kind of slight, but I think it's good time biding before their massive next album. So Big Express and Mummer do kind of occupy a similar space for me. I think Big Express is a little bit better than Mummer, so I'm going to give this one the same rating. I'm going to give it a 3.5 out of 5.
So I think that Big Express is my lesser favorite of the two, but I do think that it's a bit overhated by a lot of people. But the production is a problem for me in some ways in a lot of the songs. I like Wake Up as a composition and as an opener, but the very dense production is immediately apparent, and the drums are especially very big in 80s. All the Pretty Girls has a similar situation happening, and I think this is the most like 80s they've sounded to this point. The drums are the thing that stand out the most on all of these songs at that point in the album. And the fact that they retain their corporate personality with this heavier handed production does stop it from being a complete disaster for me. Songs like Shake Your Donkey Up and Seagulls Screaming Kiss Her, especially the latter, would be much better for me with different production for sure. This World Over is a bit more restrained, but less interesting as a song for me personally, sorry. The Everyday Story of Small Town is my favorite song up to this point, and so far the best, most balanced sounding song for me and my preferences for the production. I Bought Myself a Lyrebird is also strong. Overall, I think everything is more balanced on side 2 of this album, better songs and not quite so busy and overdone. You're the Wish You Are I Had is another highlight for me. I'm less high on Train Running Low on Soul Coal, which I think returns to some of the trappings of the cluttered, to my ears, production.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah. But the strength of the majority of side 2 absolutely elevates this album for me. Not that I necessarily think that side 1 is bad. I just think that overall the songs are stronger and sound better to my ears. It still ends up being a pretty inconsistent album with some flaws, but not nearly as bad as you think from its reputation, because I've heard some people put this at the bottom, but I don't think it belongs there. So for me, it's like a flat 3.5, kind of like right down the middle. So there's some good stuff, just not great.
So I think that this is one of those albums where, like, if you're kind of lukewarm on the band, like this is like what you hate about them in a way, you know? And that, like, the songs, like you mentioned, like the songs are catchy, but they're like kind of annoyingly catchy in a way that's like not good. And they sort of like, to me, they sort of like go back a little to like the white music period where, like, especially in Andy's vocals, like he's kind of just trying different things out. He's making like a lot of animal noises and like, you know, he's doing things where if you were like new to the band and you heard this first, you'd probably wonder, like, you'd think that they were more gimmicky than they were. And a lot of that, you know, as you two both mentioned, is down to the production, which is just like overly loud. I think, especially in a song like Rain It Blows, like you can hear all these things sort of clashing with each other. But yeah, I mean, ultimately there are like a lot of really good songs on it. I think This World Over does. The reason why it's a highlight to me is because that's the one that I think actually is like produced and arranged really well. Like it kind of sounds like something on English Settlement, like on the first record of that. But to me, like I kind of like, personally, I like the gimmicky stuff on here, at least some of it. Like Shake You Donkey Up to me is like a really funny song. Like I'm not really sure what it is about it that makes me laugh so much, but it's just like it's so over the top, you know? And I really appreciate Andy kind of going like, if we're going to do this, we're going to make it as stupid as possible.
Yeah,
you know?
like, go big or go home.
Yeah, I mean, you can't tell if he's like making fun of this kind of music or if he's like, if he really like intended for it to sound like that. You know, it's kind of a joke track.
I think it's like following in the tradition of the more like squonky talking head songs that would be on like Speaking. No, what's that album called with
Speaking in Tongues?
Speaking in Tongues, yeah. Like stuff like that really reminded me of like the totally positively dumb, off the wall funk and dance music on that would come like 3 years later on that album.
But like Andy Partridge doesn't quite have like the cool that David Byrne has, you know? Like he comes off a lot.
I would disagree. I think Andy's a lot cooler than David Byrne.
Well, I mean, I can see that, depending on what kind of music you're into, but like he sort of had this look about him that I think more people were, I'd say, intrigued by, you know? Like he had like a more of an iconic persona, whereas Andy Partridge, like, you know, sometimes he comes off like he's being annoying just to be annoying. I mean, I don't think so. I know you don't think so. But like, I think, again, like I said, if you don't like the band, this is probably like one of your least favorite records by them. And I will point out that, again, like this record did not sell very well at all. I think that the band probably should have been out. I think like this was, it's kind of remarkable that like this and Mummer did not kill the band, because both of them, I think, sold so little that I think a lot of people had assumed they had broken up at that time. And I mention this because I know we're not going to do like the Dukes albums, but I have a friend, he's a guy that works at the record store. He's like a generation older than me, and he was really into XTC, but like back when they were originally, you know, during their original run, like when they were on the radio and stuff. And he had mentioned that he had read about the Dukes of Stratosphere in Rolling Stone, and he ordered their records, and he was really into them. And he did not know until years later that it was the same band as XTC. Like he'd gotten into them like independently. And he said, like, at the time, he's like, I didn't even know XTC were still around, because like they had these records after English Settlement, but they were not promoted at all. They had no singles. Like, you know, back then you couldn't just go online and look up what these bands were up to. So like, yeah, I mean, overall, I give this and Mummer, I gave them both 3.5. Like, you know, again, they'd be good albums in another catalog. In XTC's catalog, they're, you know, they're just kind of okay. I think there's a lot to like about this one, but, you know, overall, it's the only one of their albums that gives me like kind of ear fatigue, you know, like it's just a little too much sometimes.
Yeah,
And
Oranges and Lemons does that for me. I think the production on that is so loud.
So yeah, it's decent, but yeah. And I guess we're not getting into the Duke stuff, but I give them 4.5. I'll get that in there.
Okay, I gotta listen to those more intently. They were cool when I put them on, but I didn't. And this video might be long enough as it is, so
Right.
it's maybe it might be good that we check out the Dukes though. They're good. So now we're going on to Skylarking. And so this is like, if this is not called their best album, I don't know what is. This is like their magnum opus, I think. In the public, this is their most famous album. You got Todd Rundgren doing the production. And this is really an immaculate like song cycle of sunshine pop and jangle pop and neo psychedelia, and whether they're doing like those styles or more folky numbers, every song is written so well. And I think that this is like the height of their studio as instrument approach, because if you listen to it on headphones, there's a lot of cool stuff. There's like bicycle bell percussion, there's like shakers, there's samples of foghorns, there's all different sorts of sounds, bird sounds, animal noises, and that gives the album a color that I think it would be merely a great collection of songs, but that kind of brings it to another level with Andy and Todd, like being at the helm of the production. And it's just so cohesive and well done. And yeah, it kind of reminds me of, I don't know if you guys know Margot Gurian. She has this album called Take a Picture, I think. And it's kind of this kind of lollipop, like idyllic psychedelia that really reminds me of Skylarking. And kind of the Van Dyke Parks and the Monkees are kind of in the same vein, where it's just so sunny and bright and just optimistic sounding. And yeah, it's as close to perfection as I think they've ever gotten. I mean, if I would call this album perfect, I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5. And it's got I think Colin's best song on here is probably The Meeting Place, which I don't hear many people talking about it. I do think that's Colin's best song. I love the melody on it, and I love the sound effects that are all over the left and the right channel. And it's just a really lovely arrangement. And I like Ballet for a Rainy Day. Earn Enough for Us is like really straightforward power pop. And also I wanted to point out that there's a lyric on Earn Enough for Us where Andy says, glad that you want to be my wife. And I always thought that was a really funny conceit for a line. Like, I'm glad that you want to be my wife. I don't know. Big Day is another really good Colin song. It reminds me of like the George Harrison Beatles. Dear God, that's another highlight for me. I consider it on the album. I mean, I know there's a lot of things with the track list, like Mermaid Smile is off some issues. Dear God is off other issues. I have the one with the 15 tracks, and I think that's how it's supposed to be listened to. I think if you remove Dear God, the album is not as cohesive. So I would just get the one with 15 tracks. And my least favorite...
Dear God, sorry.
Oh,
it's not part of the album technically. Mermaid Smile was part of the original album.
I would argue that adding Dear God into the slot where it's supposed to be does give it a little more gravitas. But yeah, my least favorites on here are Another Satellite, which is an okay song. It's got like a cool spacey cocktail vibe. And Dying, which is another Colin song, which is it's an okay folk song. But I think that this is such a brilliant album. Not only music, but Andy's writing some of the best lyrics of his whole career. Like on Season Cycle, he's the only guy who's going to write a line about there being a verdant spiral in this Beach Boys-esque pop song, and yeah, Ballet for a Rainy Day has it as well with there's a line, silent film of melting miracle clay, which I don't know what that means, but it's just so evocative and it's like having fun with language. I think Andy is very good at, and I think he should have done more of. But this is kind of, I think, his best moments lyrically because they're so evocative and they bring to mind like a sunny day at the picnic to me. I think it's perfect album, 5 out of 5. I do want to bring up, there's a song that called the Man Who Sailed Around His Soul, which is like 80s, like 70s noir jazz that's like from a PC computer game or something. Like it sounds so fake and like midied out, but it sounds really cool, and they nailed the noir vibe really well. That's another highlight for me. So yeah, I'm gonna give a 5 out of 5, and yeah, it's called their masterpiece for good reason. This is my favorite, and I also think it's their best.
Yeah, agreed. Pretty easily their best for me, like by a pretty wide margin. So yeah, Summer's Cauldron immediately sets the scene and atmosphere, hazy like a summer day, and I think that really sets the vibe for the whole album very well. The way that it goes right into grass is glorious, and they fit together so well, continuing that vibe. The arrangements here are rich and lush, but in all the right ways that serve the songs rather than work against them, like we've seen in some of the previous albums. Todd Rundgren brings that extra set of ears that elevates their songs. I think they need somebody there. I think they self-produced those last two albums, and they need somebody else there, especially Todd. I mean, I'm a huge Todd fan anyway, but I think that he just was the right fit, even though they didn't get along personally, which was a shame. So that's why they never worked together again. I think that he did the best work with them of any producer that they worked with personally. So the songs also have a flow that they were sometimes missing on some of those previous efforts. The meeting place drives the album forward from the hazy scene setting from the first two songs. That's really Supergirl is positively infectious, super catchy. You don't forget it when you hear it the first time. You'll never forget it again after that. Ballet for a Rainy Day, which really sets this album apart from the others, like just great songs, one after the other. It's such a leap forward from everything else. The rich 60s influence really serves both Andy and Colin's songwriting very well without compromising their identity. Earn Enough for Us opens side 2 strongly and is super catchy, and I love that jangly sound, especially on the outro. Big Day has some cool Beatlesque flourishes, like you said, and is a song that really stood out to me this time around listening to the album. I knew this album well. Another Satellite has a super cool spacey sound that goes along with the lyrics and really enhances that scene setting, like you said. But I think, again, with Todd there, he knows the right little touches to put in and what not to put in, which is important. The Man Who Sailed Around His Soul has a cool, jazzier influence, like you said, brings some interesting flavor to the album, has a spy movie feel. Dying is a beautiful, somber moment from Colin, and I think he really shines on this album. Also, obviously, Andy does as well. They both do. Colin's Sacrificial Bonfire is a great closer for the album, because for me, I always go where I original issue. So it's even a 5 for me without Dear God. Dear God's just a bonus in my eyes. I'm a bit of a stickler that way, but that's just me. Ultimately, this is their masterpiece, like you said. There isn't a weak song, and it's a great listen beginning to end. Flows very well. Lots of standout songs, lots of songs you never forget. And I think working with Todd really helped them realize their vision. So it's 5 stars for me, of course.
I think it's going to be 5 stars for Nick as well. Am I right?
Yeah, I'm not going to challenge any of you on that. I think that it is important when you're like telling the story of this band to like bring up the Dukes of Stratosphere stuff, because, as I mentioned, like they were kind of floundering after English Settlement, because like, again, the record company wasn't promoting them. Their albums weren't as good as they used to be. I think that what had happened is it sort of got into this idea, like, we're going to do this psychedelic pop alter ego sort of thing. And not only were they like, did they seem to have a lot of fun doing it, but like the stuff was really well received. Even like when people didn't know it was XTC, like those albums got really good reviews. And there were people, like it wasn't really clear that this wasn't like a modern band doing this. Like it sounded so authentic. And I think the fact that like they were well received kind of upped their spirits a bit and maybe gave them a new sense of direction. Because, as you both mentioned, like this is a very like 60s sounding album, which is sort of like what really drew me to it the first time I heard it. But like, it's not ahead of its time at all, but it's not really like before its time either. It's sort of like out of time in a way. Like if you were to guess, it sounds like Too Good to be recorded in like 1969, but it has like that sound to it. And it's almost surprising that Todd Rundgren is the one to produce it, because I know that like his 70s stuff has that like kaleidoscopic sound to it, like really treble heavy, which I think this album has too. But like the stuff he was doing like in the mid 80s sounded pretty mid 80s. So like the fact that he sort of went back to like, you know, that his old production style in a way, like I think he got what this album was about, like better than anyone else would have. So yeah, he was definitely the right choice for it. And obviously, if you know their personalities, it's pretty obvious why they wouldn't have gotten along because they're both very headstrong. But yeah, I think what I dig about this album is that like it has like a pretty lofty concept to it. Like it's basically the cycle of life from birth, teenage years, you know, marriage. I believe Another Satellite is about your marriage falling apart. I think I'm not sure if that was autobiographical or not, but I think that like there was another woman in his life at that time, or there might have been that he was tempted by, and that's what that song was about. So like after that point, things get a little more downtrodden, and you know, obviously the end is about passing on and you know giving way to the next generation. And I think that's like a really ambitious concept for an album to have. And I know like a lot of bands try stuff like that and it doesn't quite work out, but it works out really well for them. And it isn't the thing with Dear God is kind of interesting to me because to me, Mermaid Smiled would be like the bonus track on the album. Like that's the one that doesn't really fit in to me. So to find out that like that was originally on there and not Dear God, which apparently Andy I think didn't like, but Todd Rundgren was like, no, this is a hit. Like you got to put it on the album. And he ended up, you know.
Todd's like an instigator. He wants to get the band, you know, as in much trouble as possible for the publicity.
Yeah, back then that was controversial, I guess. I mean, I don't think it's like one of his better songs, but you know, at this point, I root for any XTC song that's successful in any way. So I guess good on him for that. I mean, I think you two both nailed it. Like it's classic from start to finish. I think it's timeless. I mean, obviously it does seem very inspired from like a specific era of like particularly British music, but like everything on it holds up so well. Even like the Casio noises on Another Satellite or whatever that is. I mean, that sounds like a children's toy, but like they write such good songs around everything that it all works out. So yeah, I mean, it's like I'd say it's one of the best pop albums ever made.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. And I think that they did such a good job reining it in. I mean, you can imagine if Andy got his hands on this sans Todd, he would want to clutter it up with you know, animal noises and strange synthesizers and sitars and bongos. But they really do a good job of, when there is a lot going on in the song, they know when to mix it into the background. They know when to pull things back. They know when certain things should be accentuated. And a lot of these songs are actually pretty simple, like as far as like the arrangement or the production. Like a song like The Meeting Place, there's a lot of sound effects, but you know, it's pretty much song oriented. And I also really appreciate that on this album, that I think Todd did rein them in a little bit, even if Andy did say that he wanted to chop Todd's head off with a machete by the end of it. They were so angry with each other. I think that that is like he did a really good job. The next album is kind of in the same vein as Skylarking. Not as good, I would argue. Oranges and Lemons. And I think this is another sunny psychedelia kind of album. I just think it's more brash.
Just look at it.
Yeah, look at it. Look at the cover.
What do you think this sounds like?
Yeah. It's a little more brash and heedless than Skylarking because Andy has gotten his meaty paws on everything again, and he's kind of like mucking things up. I'll get to my criticisms of this album. I think it's excellent, but it's got some of his best songs, like Mayor of Simpleton. I don't think you can get any more perfect as a jangle pop song than Mayor of Simpleton. It's like one of these things where it's like hearing Paul McCartney, where he just knows where everything should go. He's that good of a songwriter. It's one of those type of songs. And I love Colin's King for a Day. That's one of his best songs, even though it does sound a little bit like Tears for Fears, a little Close for Comfort. And Poor Skeleton Steps Out does kind of sound like Oingo Boingo, but it's got such a cool vibe about it. Kind of reminds me of the Prince song Strange Relationship, if any of you guys know that one from the Sign of the Times album. I also like Merely a Man because it has a great chorus. And at the end, Chalk Hills and Children is one of the only XTC songs that has actually made me cry. I find it so moving, so like humble and so ethereal. And I think
it's not that bad.
What?
I was going to say it's not that bad.
No, I think that it's such a great song that it's just it's got to be one of the best songs Andy's ever done. I mean, I love Chalk Hills and Children. It's such a good closer. It's got a beautiful melody. It's so ethereal. It's like you're lifting into another stratosphere. As for my least favorites, I don't like Scarecrow People. It sounds like hokey kids music that would be playing at a pumpkin patch. And I always skip Colin's Cynical Days, and I think Pink Thing is musically fine, but lyrically this is a problem with Andy where he's getting a bit too big for his britches, and it's just crass and disgusting in a way that even for Andy Partridge, I'm like, okay, dude, you gotta chill out on like the overindulgence. And that's a problem with this album, as I think it is overindulgent. I think the production is incredibly hot. I think everything is so loud and there's no room for like, sometimes I can't even really tell what's going on in the song because everything is pushed to the forefront. There's not a lot of room for the instruments to breathe in the mix. And side C and side D do have more mediocre songs. And like side D is very, I'm just thinking about Pink Thing, how bad the lyrics are to that song. But I like the music. But it kind of airs into like fake jazz and like salsa territory a little bit. I don't know if you guys picked up on that. I don't think that's a really good sound for Andy. I don't think he does it particularly well. There's a song on here called Across This Ant Heap, which is like this genre a mash of like salsa, garage rock, and like, I don't know. It sounds so unlike anything else. That is a highlight for me. But it just sounds like a mess. And I think that's a problem with this album is it is kind of messy. They should have wheedled it down to like 12 songs instead of 15. But I think that it is so consistently wonderful. Like the songwriting, it is one of my favorite XTC albums. And it is one of the first XTC albums that I really fell in love with, even though it does have some serious flaws about it. So I'm going to give it a 4.5 out of 5. It is obnoxious sometimes. It is overindulgent. It is very loud and boisterous. But I think if you just turn the volume knob down 2 or 3 notches, you'll find that it's full of really excellent material. And it's it's a great album. It's one of my favorites. So I'm going to give this a 4.5 out of 5.
This is my hot take. This is actually my least favorite XTC album. Really tried. Can't do it. I don't hate it, but on my first listen, I was just not very big on this one at all. I hoped that I might get more out of it when I returned to it, but my initial impression was that everything but the kitchen sink production style completely distracted me from the songs and made it really difficult to focus on them to get much out of them. And despite the fact that I find the production of this album really detracts from my enjoyment of it, like a lot, I think it does start with a couple stronger songs. Garden of Earthly Delights, which I enjoy a lot as a composition, but I would like it to sound different than it does. There's a really cool guitar part on it that it feels like they completely buried it in the mix and it's overpowered by everything else. And that's kind of upsetting. Stuff like that, those decisions just did not like those decisions on the majority of this album.
I don't really like that song now that you mention it. I do like the chorus, but there's something about Andy singing in the verses that sounds like congested in a way that he normally doesn't sound. And it's like, that's one of the two. It's too ornate. There's too much going on, and I actually like the demo version. I think there's an acoustic demo on one of Andy's demo compilations that's a lot better. But I'm sorry for interrupting. I just wanted to mention that because I forgot in my summary.
So I might like that better then because I do like the song. I just don't like how it sounds on this album. And it's kind of a similar story with Mayor Simpleton. I think that's not quite as cluttered, of course, and it is a great song. It's not served well by this album and its production, I don't think. King for a Day is a decent as well. Rhythmically, like you said, reminds me a bit of Tears for Fears, but it doesn't leave a huge impression, especially for a single. That was kind of surprising to me. But from here is where things get more inconsistent for me. Here Comes President Kill Again does have a very Beatlesy vibe. And I do think that they're really emulating that a lot on this album. It's just kind of a bit overdone for me. And it's not bad, but there's something about it I just really don't care for. I'm not even sure I could totally put my finger on it. Just can't get into that song. The Loving, though, is probably my favorite on the album. That one really stands out to me. I think it has that big sound that they are going for throughout the album without feeling too cluttered and overdone. And if more of the album was like this song, I would like it a lot more, I think. Unfortunately, though, poor Skeleton Steps Out follows it, which is one I don't like the sound of at all. But I will give them that. It makes me think of cartoon skeletons, so they are setting the scene effectively. But once again, the production absolutely overwhelms the song for me. Scarecrow People, like you said, has a catchy chorus, but I'm just not a fan of the production on the verses, and it does sound pretty goofy. Merely a Man is also pretty bad sounding to me. A bit of an little too 80s, too much embellishment. I don't think it adds anything positive for my ears. And this is a shame because I do think that's a really good song. Colin's Cynical Days is okay, but far from his best. And that kind of sets the scene for the next few albums for him, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Across the Antheap has way too much going on at once, like noises and embellishments coming from all directions. I listened a lot on headphones, so that does not help that aspect probably, but that's the best way to hear things, of course. Hold Me, My Daddy, I don't like the reggae influences. I don't think that works for them. Pink Thing is a catchy song, but yeah, it's a little weird. But then Miniature Sun.
I was going to say that's an understatement of the year.
Yeah, but I mean, it doesn't bother me so much, but it's already on an album that I'm having some troubles with. So it is. I like the production on it, though. It's comparatively spare, relatively speaking. That part is good. But then Miniature Sun comes crashing in with the same problems as the other songs for me. But Chalk Hills and Children's functions very well as a closer. There's an ethereal quality to it, like you said, which really would come through better for me if it was a little more restrained, which I know I keep saying that, but that's really how I feel listening to this record. And I kept going back to it and it didn't really go away. But I do like that they end with the lyrics with Nonsuch in the lyrics. And I don't know if that's like a allusion to the next album intentionally or not, but it's kind of a cool touch that I noticed.
They do that on Ballet for a Rainy Day, where Andy says orange and lemons.
Oh, yeah, that's true too. Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. So obviously it's a thing. But ultimately, I still have my issues with this album, which I realize is out of step with the typical fan rankings of it. I know it's rated very high. It's one of their bolted albums on Rate Your Music. I just don't get it. And that'll probably get me some hate in the comments, but I got to be honest. I'm not sure I will ever get past the production, but I have found more things about it to appreciate than initially did when I first started listening to it. So there's definitely positives, and I don't hate it or anything. It just ends up being my least favorite album by them, so it is 3 stars for me.
Now, Nick, I know you're actually quoted on the Wikipedia page for this album. Did you know that?
I am? No, I didn't know that.
It says that you liken this album to eating too many candy bars.
Oh, that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
You know, and I'll tell you why that is. So the difference between this album and Skylarking, you know, obviously Todd Rundgren is out on this album. The guy who produced it was a young guy named Paul Fox, who I'm not sure what else he appeared on. I think this was like his first production job.
He did John Henry by They Might Be Giants. He did John Henry by They Might Be Giants.
Did he really? Oh, yeah. That's cool. That I did not know. But I think what I'd heard is that the band like really liked this guy. Like he was a fan of the band. He was apparently pretty easygoing and easy to work with. And I think that might have been the problem with it is that, you know, obviously Todd and Andy didn't really get along. They were kind of jerks to each other, but like that's what made the album better is that like Todd was willing to say like, no, you're not doing this. Like you got to do this instead. Like I know pop music better than you. I feel like this guy, Paul Fox, probably just let him do whatever they wanted. And like, you know, as you both mentioned, like there's just too many sounds on this thing.
Yeah.
Which sometimes isn't necessarily a bad thing. Like I actually really like the way Garden of Earthly Delight sounds. Outside of the fact that there's not really any bass on it. I remember the first time I heard this, it was on cassette, and I accidentally like had the treble all the way turned up. I was like, oh my God, this sounds terrible. And then I turned it down to medium. It's like, oh, it still sounds kind of bad, but you know, it's a little better. I think that this album would probably benefit from like cutting a few songs. But like despite like its flaws, I still think there's like a lot of really good parts on it. Like there's a lot of, you know, you mentioned The Loving, like that's a really good song. You know, stuff like Merely a Man, Scarecrow People, Poor Skeleton Steps Out, like those are all like really catchy songs, even if you don't, you know, I can understand not liking them, but like they got good melodies, like they're well constructed in a way. They kind of sound stupid, but you know, I don't really mind that personally. I think that there's like a lot of good sections on this album. And one thing that's really interesting to me, there's like this Japanese electronic group that I'm into called Denki Groove that for some reason sampled 3 different parts of this album on one of their CDs. Which
cool.
they have nothing in common. They don't sound alike at all. But like I think it's cool that like they found enough like cool bits of this album to sample. So I guess like if you're searching for it, there's like enough good music on here. I think as you mentioned, Mayor Simpleton is like another perfect pop song. I think Colin's bass playing is really good on this album, especially on that song. And I actually realized that I heard Mayor Simpleton in a Wendy's once. The Wendy's in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, whoever runs that radio station is really good. They play like that. They play like Joe Jackson, stuff like that. The Cars, like really good fast food music station. And I remember hearing it there. I don't know if it was because of the acoustics of the place or something, but I was like, yeah, this has a really great bass part in it that I just had not really heard before.
The
Colin
bass
does have one other. What's that?
I was going to say the bass in Mayor of Simpleton. I think Andy talked about how he wanted each part to not be mimicking what the melody is doing, which is a lot right. Of he wanted everything to be kind of like Bach, like classical like so it's doing a lot of weird triads and everything. That's one of the songs where the bass playing really sticks out to me. Also, another song where the bass sticks out to me is on Miniature Sun, because it does have that slinky jazz vibe, and I do like the bass line. Even though I don't think that's the best song, I do like the bass for that song.
I think the horns on it sound really bad.
Like, really? That might be MIDI. It might be MIDI.
Yeah,
horns.
I don't think they're real. It kind of sounds like a bad Joe Jackson song in a way, but it's like there's enough good parts of it. Like the ending of that song, I really like. No, the one I wanted to mention, Colin's song, One of the Millions, I really like. I think that's one of his last really great songs. So, yeah, overall, I gave it a 3.5. I don't think it's, you know, I think it's probably one of their lesser albums. I understand the appeal of it, but it's, you know, as mentioned before, it's like a little too much to take in at once. It does have a really great closer, though. And what I really like about Chalk Hills and Children is that it has that, like, sawtooth lead synthesizer on it, which I don't think they used any. It's a real out of character sound for them to use. Like I don't think they use synths like that on anything else.
Yeah, in between the Chalk Hills and Children chorus, there's this little organ that's like kind of
yeah.
It just sounds really out of place, but it's also like that's also a tenet of Andy's writing is he'll do like these little arpeggios. And they'll just stick them in between the choruses sometimes. That song Ballet for a Rainy Day when the piano like goes up and down and it's kind of dissonant. Yeah. But yeah, I'm surprised that I'm the biggest champion of this album. I think it's fantastic, even though I think it's seriously flawed. I love the songs on it. I just love how it flows. And it just makes me happy. So it gives me happiness. I like it.
But you're not on the Wikipedia entry for this, so
yeah. Well, you got me there. So now we go into Nonsuch. So we're in the last leg of their discography. We only have 2 albums after Nonsuch, and I don't have a lot to say about Nonsuch, but I think the first half of it is very good. And I think that the last half of it is spottier than the first half. I think every song from Peter Pumpkinhead, which is another one of these effortless pop songs from Andy, where he's showing how much of a genius he is, and that how he doesn't even have to try to write amazing pop songs. Pumpkinhead into Crocodile, which is kind of a novelty song with crocodile noises. I don't know if you guys noticed this on headphones, but there's crocodile sounds in the left and the right ear. I'm like, this is like borderline a novelty single, but the chorus is so good it makes up for it. So I think from Pumpkinhead to Crocodile is an amazing run. I love Humble Daisy. It has a really subdued psychedelic sound, even for them. And Smartest Monkeys, that's a Colin song, but it's so preachy. I thought it was Andy, but I realized that it's Colin. And that song has like a weird sound to it where it's kind of like light grunge, it's kind of dissonant and like grungy, but it's not grunge at all. It still has a pop framework. And I would describe the sound of this album as their kind of adult rock album. You know, you have a lot of adult contemporary on here, like Then She Appeared, and stuff like Books Are Burning and Rook. And nothing against adult contemporary. I mean, I love Apple Venus, and that's a good amount of Apple Venus's, adult contemporary and not R&B, but like Elton John kind of tier, Tarzan soundtrack kind of music. And I think that Apple Venus really nails that. I think Nonsuch, they're definitely getting prepared for Apple Venus, but I don't think those types of songs stick the landing as well as they do on the next album. But I think there's more room for meandering and questionable choices because it is 17 tracks. And it doesn't need to be 17 tracks. I mean, it could be 14 or 13. And yeah, so I'd say my highlights, the sound of it is kind of Bacharach and Elton John kind of meets like light grunge or like radio rock. It's kind of Americanized in a way to my ears that I'm not really crazy about. But I do think it is a great album. And despite my reservations, I love The Disappointed. My Bird Performs is like another flawless Colin song. I love that tune. And Holly Up on Poppy, which Andy wrote about his daughter at the time and her love for her rocking horse. I actually asked Holly about what she thought of the song, and I got a response from her, which was really cool.
What did she say?
I have it here, but I don't know if we have enough time, but I'll read it.
All right. Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Do we get a thumbs up? I mean, do you want me to read it?
Sure, go. I mean, if you don't mind.
Okay. So she wrote me back. It was on Reddit, so it was really cool that she responded. I was like, wow, Holly Partridge responded to me.
So she said,
yeah. She said, when I first heard it, I was only a young kid. Back then, I was so embarrassed that Dad had written a song about me in one of my toys. And I have a faint memory of threatening to smear marmalade on the DAT tapes, Paddington Bear style, so that it couldn't be released. What an ungrateful little brat. These days, I'm very glad I didn't whip the marmalade out. I think it's really charming, lovely melody, and I feel so honored that he shared his love for me in the song. It does sound almost exactly how writing High Up on Poppy it felt to me at the time, so it's a slice of time travel for me now. And she mentions how she just had a daughter, so it obviously has a new dimension for her. And she says, I have very fond memories of Poppy the rocking horse, and she's being passed on to my daughter Bonnie. It fills my heart that she'll get to enjoy not only the horse, but a song written in the horse's honor. Thank goodness for that marmalade shortage in the early 90s. I thought that was a really amazing exclusive thing that we got on this album, that comment from her. But other than that, I really like Holly Up on Poppy, by the way. It's such a cute song. I mean, how could you not smile listening to that? It's like a lullaby. Yeah, but a lot of the adult contemporary stuff I don't like Rook and Omnibus has lyrics that are kind of like racially insensitive. Like, I'm not sure if that's the intent of the song, but it's one of these things where Andy is somebody should have said, don't do that, and he was just left to his own devices for too long. Books Are Burning, I think that's a lesser rewrite of Chalk Hills of Children, and it's a little anticlimactic. And I also thought that Andy is singing like Eddie Vedder on That Wave a little bit, but it sounds like he's making fun of Eddie Vedder's singing style, and I don't know if that's what he's going for, but he has that like yarling sound to his voice, like he's parodying the grunge movement. That's what I noticed. And I really don't like that song. I think it's one of the worst songs they've ever done. Yeah, I think Nonsuch is great, but I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5, even though I do have my reservations about it. It's very good, very accomplished, and it's a good later period album for them.
Yeah, I like Nonsuch better than the previous album. My first impression is that I did like it better, and I do think it sounds less cluttered and messy to my ears, more straightforward. I'm not sure. I think maybe we're defining adult contemporary a little differently, especially in the early 90s. I think of different things, but I kind of see what you mean at the same time. As I listened to more, there were a lot of great songs that revealed themselves on this album. I think that things open really strong with Battle of the Peter Pumpkinhead, which is one of their classics and one of their well-known songs, I think. Although I first heard it as a cover by a band called the Crash Test Dummies from Canada, which is quite a bit different because it was a bit of a radio hit here. So that was my first exposure to it. But I definitely prefer the XTC version, I would say. It's super catchy and infectious. I really like My Bird Performs, like you mentioned. It's my favorite Collins song post Skylarking, pretty easily. And it's a nice bridge between Peter Pumpkinhead and Dear Madam Barnum, which are both great pop songs. I think there's a cool solo on Collins' Smartest Monkeys. It's a catchy song, but not a lot else to say about it, really. It's just a catchy song. The Disappointed is a highlight for me. Great, catchy, bouncy pop song. Great choice for a lead single of the album. Even though I'd never heard it outside the album, I can see why they picked it. And their quirkier embellishments here, like those on Crocodile that you mentioned, work much better here for me, since everything is able to breathe a little more without that whole constant wall of sound on the previous album. I feel similarly about Rook because it's showcasing a more serious epic side as opposed to quirky. I think that it's done a little better for me here. But Omnibus and That Wave I could do without. Neither are bad, but given the length of this album, they could easily be cut because we don't need 17 songs, like you said. That is a bit too much. Then She Appeared, picks things back up. It's got that Beatlesque sound again, really nice harmonies. War Dance is another one I would cut. It's memorable, but it's not one of my favorites. But I do think Wrapped in Grey is a Beatlesque highlight, very beautiful. There's a cool contrast between the verses and the chorus on the ugly underneath, creating a push and pull element, which I think that they return to quite often throughout their career and do well. Bungalow brings a unique flavor to the album, which is something I find about all of Collins' songs here. Even if I don't love them all, there's always a contrast, but it feels really pronounced on this album between Andy's and Collins' songs. Books Are Burning closes things out nicely for me. I think that it has a great guitar solo that feels like it's sending us out on a high note, so I like that one. But ultimately, I think this album is good. I like the more straightforward sound, and I think that there's some really great songs here. But what does hold it back a little bit is that there's just too many of them. I don't feel like it needed to be a 17-song, over an hour-long album. If they'd made it like 12 songs, it would probably be much better. Like if they picked the best songs, there probably would be up in the higher end for me. But there's nothing bad here either. It's still a high 3.5. I did like it a lot, but yeah, could be shorter.
Well, I agree with what you both said that I think this should be a 12 or 13 song album. I can tell you what songs I would cut too, but I'm sure you've already mentioned them. And the reason why that's like so important in like my evaluation of this is because like the songs that are good are like so good that it's kind of disappointing when you hear like, That Wave, which is, yeah, I can get the appeal of it, but there's like not much of a song there, And I feel like when your album's going to be an hour long, like you shouldn't do stuff like that. Personally, I don't really like the Ballad of Peter Pumpkinhead. It seems like not like, I don't want to say it's like tuneless, but it's just not. It doesn't have that like hook that a lot of XTC's best stuff has for me. Ditto for like Books Are Burning, which it's a pretty song, but I think for me, the song Wrapped in Gray is like such a perfect, like it would have been such a perfect closer, like not just for the album, but like their whole career. And obviously I'm glad they didn't like end it there. But if you don't know the story behind that song, I believe that was supposed to be one of the singles. And I think Virgin just like kind of like rejected it outright. Like they said, I think they like just didn't like the song. And Andy like really liked the song. And he was basically willing to like throw away the band's career for it, which, you know, when I first heard this album, I thought the song was kind of boring, but like as you get older, you start to realize that there's like a really profound message behind it. That like as you reach middle age, you know, a lot of the joy in life has been kind of sucked out of the people around you. You know, like life kind of wears on people, or life becomes like too much of a routine. You know, every year you kind of like less and less stuff, and this song is kind of a rebellion against that. It's saying that like, you know, as you get older, you have to continue to be, you know, excited by new things, and you have to be like outgoing and make new friends. Like, I think the song says it better than I can, but like hearing it now that I'm in my late 30s, it's profound in a way that I did not get, you know, when I first heard the song. And now I understand why he was willing to like go on strike in service of it. Say like, no, if we're not doing this, we're going to wait out our contract. So that's one of the good songs. Yeah, I mean, Dear Madam Barnum, I think is really great. Like Holly Up on Poppy, like you mentioned, My Bird Performs. Like all these songs are so good, it's almost like they're showing off. And what I think really makes it even better is that the production, I think they got Gus Dudgeon. Yeah, Gus Dudgeon, who I think was like Elton John's guy. And I think that's why this sounds like so much better and more professional than Oranges and Lemons does. So like to me, it's hit or miss, but like the good stuff is so good that I give it a 4 out of 5. And also I want to mention War Dance. The reason why that song bothers me is because I keep thinking the bass line, like the bass line of that song makes me think that they're going to start playing Lowrider by War. Maybe that was intentional. I don't know. But like, I hate it when a song like almost quotes something, but then doesn't. That really bothers me.
Yeah.
And I will defend Omnibus. I think it's too stupid to be racist, in my opinion. Like, well, I get the controversy behind it, but it's like, it's almost like too ridiculous to take seriously. Yeah. Which is something Andy's gotten away with a lot.
I mean, I do agree with you that I think the thing that I like about the later period XTC is they're not afraid to get uncool, and they're not afraid to get sentimental. Especially on this next album that I'm actually going to use as a segue into Out of Nonsuch, into their next album, which takes 7 years to record. Maybe not 7 years to record, it takes 7 years to be released. But yeah, a lot of these later period songs are about, they're just more mature in that they're dealing with more mature subject matter, whether it be the disillusion of a relationship or romance. But like Nick said, there's also some songs where Andy is just ruminating on like the simple pleasures of life. And I know that I'm not, I mean, I'm only 19, but I'm very hobbyistic. So, you know, I really appreciate like the simple things in life. And like, I can really appreciate that sentiment a lot. And it's not something you see from like a popular mainstream rock band around 1992, you know, especially around the grunge movement. And I think that's what's setting XTC apart in this time period, is while other people are being influenced by, you know, indie rock and grunge and all this stuff, Andy's influenced by Bacharach and Harper's Bazaar and the Beach Boys and all this kind of schmaltzy craft mastery stuff. And I think that the sentiment just goes hand in hand with that. But yeah, so it takes a long time to record the next album, Apple Venus, because Dave Gregory has left the band. I don't remember why. I don't think that he liked the musical direction that it was taking, and I think that he was just fed up with Andy being like, you know, like a hard head in the studio, as he's known to be. Even though he'll dispute otherwise, I think that's a fair like summarization of him in the studio. So Dave's left, and it's kind of left them in a tough spot. And so now it's really just Andy and Colin. So it's really like an Andy solo project with Colin on the side, sometimes doing his songs and contributing to the production and the instruments. But it's really Andy who's running the show now. Now that Dave is gone, and this is like a very kind of troubled album. It reminds me of the Ween album Quebec a little bit, because not only is it their second to last album, but a lot of these songs have to do with divorce and breakups, and it just kind of has this like kind of lamentful, sad air about it that's little bit depressing, and it's very adult, it's very mature. But I think this album is so, I mean, this is like, for the end of your career, this is like got to be top 3 XTC albums for me. I mean, I love this album. It's just beautiful, and it's a wonderful collection of songs. They ruminate on family, love, divorce, and I mean, it's got lots of woodwind instruments, and a lot of it is like, some of it is kind of MIDI, like on Green Man, like what instrument is that? Like an oboe. It's obviously a fake oboe, because which kind of gives it the saccharine sheen. But I think that this album is extremely well produced. It's got these hollow like percussions, kind of like shakers and bongos and triangles and stuff. But Andy's vocals and Colin's vocals are mixed to the forefront, and there's not a lot of backing. There's some backing vocals, but a lot of these songs are, just 1 or 2 vocal tracks, which I think it translates to the sparseness of the emotionality of a lot of these songs. I just love how mature it sounds. I love pretty much everything about it. It's almost a 5 out of 5. The reason why it's not a 5 out of 5 is Colin kind of messes it up with Frivolous Tonight and Fruit Nut. And I do like Frivolous Tonight, but I do think there's something weird with the production on that song. Like, his voice sounds like they flew it in from the Nonsuch sessions, and it sounds like anachronistic with the instrumentation that's on the original song. So it always was a weird one for me to listen to. And Fruit Nut has a really cool, like, I think it's like a wood block that's like ran through distortion, so it sounds like a synth. But the overall song is not very good, even though I do like that synth hook quite a bit. But yeah, the sound of this is like lamentful chamber pop, and just songs like Easter Theater, which has to be one of the best songs ever written. If it's not Andy's best song, I don't know what is. This is like a masterclass in how to write an amazing song. Harvest Festival is another one I like because of the love imagery of it. It's one of those breakup songs, but it has sort of kind of a younger tint to it. It's more innocent. Songs like I Can't Own Her, that's another one that's got me kind of teary-eyed, because it makes me think of my nieces. And I had to leave them on a trip to Pennsylvania once, and I was listening to that song. So that always really resonates with me as being a sad one. And I love The Last Balloon, too, as a great closer. And I love the way that Andy's high note fades out into the saxophone at the end, and you kind of can't tell when his voice ends and the saxophone note begins. I always thought that was a really cool way to end the album. But overall, it's going to be a 4.5 out of 5 from me, and I love it. It's beautiful, it's wistful, and I find that I do a lot of thinking when I listen to this album. So, yeah, I think it's fantastic.
It's one of their more high-regarded ones I've seen just around. Now, for me, my initial impression of this album was not the best. I found it to be a little boring, which I guess because it's pretty introspective, it just didn't quite connect to me at first. Thought it might actually be my least favorite album, despite not minding the production, which was my big stumbling block for Oranges and Lemons. But I have come around a bit on it quite a bit from my first listen to it. It doesn't start on the best note for me, which is different than a lot of their albums. The River of Orchids, I'm just not the biggest fan of it as a song, but I do kind of see it as an introduction to the album at the same time. So it's kind of one, like, I can see why they picked it. It's just not the best opener for me personally, but it does have a build and a bit of drama to kick things off. It just, I don't feel much of a connection to it, but I like that is a very welcome change of pace for me, and one of the best songs on the album for me. The pop song, kind of pop songwriting that Andy does best. I really like that one. Easter Theater is good, very Beatlesque. I like that one a lot as well too. Nights in Shining Karma just kind of floats by and fails to make a big impression on me, and that's kind of my big issue with the stuff that I don't like as much. It's not that it's bad, I just don't necessarily connect to it as much as some other stuff. Frivolous Tonight has grown on me a bit. I didn't like it at all the first time I heard the album, but it's because it's unusual for Colin, because usually I really respond to his songs throughout their earlier part of their career. So to not like his songs later on is a very jarring juxtaposition from the rest of the discography. But while it's not my favorite, it's fine. I've gotten to appreciate it a bit more. Green Man is a highlight for me. One of the more memorable songs, I think, on the album, and one that I would return to. Definitely one I like. One I don't like, but mostly because of the lyrics, is Your Dictionary. I really just don't like that spelling motif that they got. I get what they're doing there, but it just does not.
I wanted to say something about Your Dictionary. You just reminded me. Even though the lyrics are very juvenile and it's like a 13-year-old wrote them, I don't know. I just love the melody of it, and I love the piano and the guitars that come in on the right channel in the second half. But it's like kind of the lyrics are, yeah, like you said, the spelling motif is kind of juvenile, even for Andy. It's kind of like, I wish maybe somebody gave these lyrics a once over that wasn't Andy, and maybe he could have, rewrote them. I do love that song, though, but the lyrics are a problem, and I've seen people call out the lyrics a lot. But I'm sorry for interrupting. I just wanted to mention that. Yeah.
No, it's a nice song. And usually I'm not necessarily a huge stickler for lyrics. Like, it's not necessarily the first thing I gravitate towards in music. Music is the first thing I gravitate towards, and then lyrics can kind of enhance or detract. But this is one of the examples where the lyrics they're hard to ignore. It's such a central part of the song. So it does hold it back a little bit, but it is a good song other than that. So that is a bit of a shame. I do like that this album is more stripped back, and I really like the pleasant sound of the pianos and when the piano and strings come in on that song, especially, and how the song slowly builds. So I do think it's a good song, like you said, but that lyrical thing is a little rough.
And it's so sparse too. It's like the only thing that you could pay attention to in the track is Andy's lyrics, because they're so mixed, so loud, Yeah.
So it is hard to ignore, unfortunately. Fruit not my favorite, like you said. Maybe a little too goofy sounding. I don't know, just not feeling that one. But the orchestration on I Can't Own Her is very nice. I think it really enhances the song a lot and is used very well. Harvest Festival is nice, has a similar vibe to other songs in the album, but doesn't really stand out much for me. And I think that's kind of my issue with some of the album, is that it's starting to feel very XTC, which shouldn't be a problem, but I'm looking for a little more, something to mix it up a little bit, I think. And that's kind of what doesn't make me love this. I still like it, but I don't quite love it. And my first impression was that it was rather samey. More listens reveal more variety than I initially thought, but I'm still not that excited about much of it. So even though the songs I consider highlights are relative to the album and don't really necessarily hold a candle for me to the rest of their catalog, so it's not an album I expect I will revisit very often, and there's just so many others that I do like more than it. So it is a light 3.5 stars for me, but still better than I thought initially. So, and I can see why it's one that people respond to, because it is more of a introspective album.
Yeah, and also it's important to say that they've cut down the tracks a lot. This is only 11 tracks, which is coming out off of these jumbo-sized zonk pop albums. It's like, okay, now it's time. It's room to breathe now, which I appreciate that a lot about Apple Venus too. So, Nick, what do you think about Apple Venus? Is this one of your favorites?
Yeah, this is one of my favorites. To me, it's probably Andy Partridge's like most impressive album in a way. Like,
yeah,
because I already mentioned that they kind of culminated in Skylarking as like the perfect pop album, but I think like the thing I really appreciate about Andy Partridge is that he's like a student of pop music in a way. Like he's kind of like, reminds me of those kids that like take apart electronics and stuff and like rebuild it from scratch, and they go on to be like great engineers and stuff because they had that sort of mindset at a young age. Like that's the way he is with like the Beatles and stuff, like the very best of like 60s pop. Like I feel like he innately understands that stuff, and that he's kind of spent his life like putting that back together, in search of like the perfect pop song. And I think like here, the fact that they waited like this long to make like an orchestral album, like to me, I don't know if this was the intent at all, but I feel like this was like Andy saying like, all right, we're ready to do this now. Like, I think I can write songs like worthy of this like grandiose production. Right.
uh-huh.
And I can understand how that would come off as being like boring to some people. Like, I kind of get that. There are definitely parts of this album that I thought were boring, like when I first heard it. But like now I kind of like respect the craft so much that it, for all the flaws of it, which I think there are a few, like I think that there are parts that come across so well that like I can't give it like less than a 5. And in particular, like I don't think Colin's songs are that good either. I feel like he seems like kind of checked out, but
yeah,
also like the album is like such an emotional ride that I'm like okay with them having like kind of some silly songs in the middle to like break it up a bit. I think River of Orchids is a really great opener because, in part, because I've never really heard a song quite like that.
Yeah,
that, like,
there's almost no melody. There's almost no melody.
Right.
Yeah.
Like that layer, like that feels like a very like almost like an electronica thing to do. Like almost like Steve Reich, to just like layer all these strings on top of each other and have something like form from it. And like I get that it's not, I know that it's sort of like a love it or hate it sort of thing. Like I kind of get it from both ways. I personally really like it. Green Man is another big highlight. I love that it's kind of got that like Middle Eastern flair to it.
Yeah, that's cool.
And it's like a really pretty song. I think I Can't Own Her is probably my favorite now. Part of that is because I have an 8-year-old daughter, and I know. So his daughter, and she must have been just born when Oranges and Lemons came out. This song was probably written in like, I don't know, 96, 97. So she probably would have been around 8 at this time.
Yeah.
Which, my daughter's 8. And I think that's right around the time when you start to feel them like pulling away from you a little bit. Like they have their own interests, their own friends and stuff. Like they still want to spend time with you, but like you kind of get that sense of like, oh, she's going to become her own person. And that was one, especially because like how emotional all the, this got like that orchestral swell to it, like in the chorus. Like that is the bit that gets me really emotional more than like any other song I can think of. And so I think like that was a big swing on his part, and I think he nailed that one. So like that alone is like enough for me to give it a 5. Like it nails what it's going for so well in certain parts. As for like Your Dictionary, I get that like the lyrics on that one are kind of bad, but I almost understand that because it comes from a place of like genuine anger. So I think that Andy, like, this is when he was going through a divorce, right? And he felt like super betrayed. And I think like when you feel like that spurned and upset, like you're not really thinking rationally, like you kind of go back to like a juvenile mindset. So like the anger in that song, I think really comes through because of how like juvenile it is,
Yeah.
It's not like a sophisticated emotion he's feeling on that one.
I was going to joke that I don't think Andy would be the most perfect person to get married to. Like, you try to go in the kitchen, he's like recording in a 4-track.
Right.
I think that would cause issues pretty quick.
But I think I think that this album, what I really love about it is just like the position it is in, in their career, because this is a band that's kind of been down and out in like 2 separate, like at this point after Nonsuch, after they decided to like go on strike with Virgin Records, like the band should have been done at that point. And like the fact that they sort of rose from that and put out something like this sophisticated and like this well crafted, I think is really cool, and like the perfect way to end their career, if in fact it had been the end of their career. But as I'm sure you're going to mention right now, there's another album after this.
Yeah, very good segue. So yeah, I mean, I do love Apple Venus, and I urge Vanessa to check it out again, because I guess the more I listened to it, the more I appreciated the adult boringness of it, which I don't think is boringness. I just think of it as unfettered maturity and being an adult, which a lot of times is not really sexy or glamorous or exciting, but it is more important than all that rock and roll histrionics that XTC were never into at all. I mean, these guys started off as rock and roll nerds and ended as, well, talk about how they ended with Wasp Star. That's a good segue.
I think that is a really good point, by the way. The fact that they were never really that successful, like, it still forced them to be real people, you know?
Yeah.
I think at one point they had to get, like, actual jobs, you know? Like, they understand the human experience, I think, more than, like, more successful groups did.
Andy's making only 20 pounds a week by the time of English Settlement coming out. Like, you know, I mean, that's not a good living. So Wasp Star. I don't know what that title means. Does anybody know what that means? Is it just like it's almost like an anagram?
I don't know either, but you had mentioned before something about how Oranges and Lemons was from a lyric on Skylarking, and then Nonsuch is from a lyric on Oranges and Lemons. I think that like that was not done intentionally, but for Apple Venus, I think Andy had said like he was combing over the lyrics to the last album. Because like someone had pointed out that, you know, you were titling your albums after lyrics from the last album, and he hadn't noticed, so he's like combing the lyrics to find a good title for the next one. That's where Apple Venus comes from. Then She Appeared, that's a lyric in that song. Wasp Star, I have no idea. So
I don't know what that's referring to. I was always curious because it's a cool album title, but I just don't know what it means. But yeah, so this is Apple Venus Volume 2, although it sounds nothing like Apple Venus Volume 1. The minute that you put it on, I think the first track is Playground. And it's funny that we've been mentioning Holly Partridge a lot because she's actually on this song. She's the schoolgirl singing the taunts. And it was weird that I recognized her voice. I didn't even look at the credits. I just kind of knew that it was her. I don't know how I did that, but I don't know. Yeah, XTC rubs off on you.
Who else would it be, right?
Yeah, I know. I mean, well, they had the kid do Dear God, so, and the little girl is on Wake Up at the end, so.
Yeah. But I feel like for these last two albums, weren't they like kind of like working in their own home studios? Like they were pretty divorced from the industry at this point.
It's pretty insular. It's a lot of home recording and flying stuff into studios. But I think Wasp Star, you know, people call it mediocre. And I gotta disagree with that. I don't think it's mediocre. I think it's pretty good actually. It's grown on me a lot. And actually, I had a weird experience with this album where I kind of put it on and I braced myself. I was like, is this going to be the worst of the worst? And by track 5, I was like, this is really cool. I really like this album a lot. And I was not, I thought it was going to be a grower, but I liked it consistently, you know, when I first put it on. And I think that people just call it mediocre because the production, it's more pop than rock, so you have a lot of sanitized keyboards and drum loops that sound like Hanson or Third Eye Blind or something. I would argue I like that about it because it introduces a curveball into the sound of XTC, which was kind of going toward orchestral pop. And Wasp Star is more rock, a little more contemporary, a little more alt rock. And it's just got a lot of songs that I really like Church of Women. Even though I don't like the lyrics, it's kind of got these aggrandizing lyrics from Andy about how much he loves women. He's kind of trying to prove that he's, I don't know what it is with him and women, but he has a lot of he tries to prove that he's heterosexual a lot. Yeah, you have that, and you have I'm the Man Who Murdered Love, which was in an episode of Gilmore Girls. I don't know if you guys know that, but a lot of these songs sound like they're trying to land more spots on Gilmore Girls. And yeah, I also like Stupidly Happy, which has that drum loop in the back of it that sounds like it's lifted from like a third eye, not like a Third Eye Blind song, but something that's like, I don't know, maybe Nick knows what I'm talking about, like Euro
The thing
pop
about I'll
or
Never Let You Go by Third Eye Blind.
yeah.
Because I tried to figure that out once, like which song came first, because they sound very similar. And I think the XTC song did come first. Or no, the Third Eye Blind song came first, but the XTC song was probably written first. So
Yeah.
I don't think either were actually influenced by the other. It's just, two great
Well,
pop songwriters come up with the same idea.
well, the production is definitely like they're definitely trying to consciously make this poppy and definitely
Yeah.
trying to load it with a lot of drum loops that sound like they're from a keyboard. I would argue that I do like that about it. It gives it like a cool vibe that the other XTC albums don't have. And I do love pop music, even like the cheesier pop music. I'm not like a musical elitist, so I love anything with a good melody. And it's a lot of good melodies on here, like We're All Light. I do think that if the arrangement to that one was a bit different, it would have been one of Andy's better songs from this period. I do like it as it is on the album though. And Church of Women is incredible. I think that's one of their best songs. And Wheel in the Maypole, I think, is excellent too. So you kind of have this poppy post grunge sound and like a lot of alt rock. And as for my least favorites, I don't like You in the Clouds Will Still Be Beautiful. I like the sentiment of it, but I don't like the island pop sound of it. I find it really to turn me off. I don't know why. And Wounded Horse is another one of Andy's bitter divorce songs that ends up even lyrically worse than Your Dictionary, because now it's like kind of I just want to take the side of his ex-wife because he's starting to get a little annoying with the divorce songs. But yeah, I do like this album quite a bit, and I think it's a solid cap to like a brilliant discography, and I'm going to give it a 3.5 out of 5. And it is in the lower tier, but it is my number 9. It's better than I think it's better than Mummer. I think it's better than White Music, and I think it's better than Go To. So it's got a lot of good songs that I like on it. Colin's got some good moments on it, like Standing In for Joe, and he has another song I think called Boarded Up. I think that's a Colin song where it sounds like nothing else he's really done. It's just like him and an acoustic guitar. And I think Andy might be slapping a guitar case for the percussion, and it sounds really cool. But yeah, I'm going to give it a 3.5 out of 5. It's optimistic, it's bright, it's got a nice poppy sheen to it. And it's a solid end to their discography. They could have went out way worse. I can tell you that right now. It's pretty good. So
Yeah, I like this one quite a bit, actually. Just one that kept growing on me as I was listening, because I did listen to all these several times. So I think that this album I think this album starts pretty strong with Playground. I really like that song. I think it's infectious and energetic right off the bat. And that's one thing I like that they do over the years is a really good opener. And I think they go back to that here for me. Stupidly Happy is catchy. I like that crunchy guitar riff on it, and it's super memorable. You hear it once, you never forget it. In Another Life is a nice song from Colin. I don't think it's a standout, but I think that his songs are a little better on this album than they have sometimes been. My Brown Guitar is an example of their more layered style done right, I think. I think it enhances the song here rather than overwhelm it. And like you said, Boarded Up is more stripped back in a way that's different, but I do think it really suits the lyrics and creates a visual that goes along with the lyrics effectively, which is a little different for Colin.
Very evocative.
Yeah. And I think it's a bit about their struggles with the music business is how I kind of interpreted it. Really stands out that way. The Man Who Murdered Love is a super, super catchy song. Another highlight, great choice for a single, immediately memorable. It reminds me of some of XTC's older singles. We're All Light has a bit of a different vibe, and I like it, but it's got some really nice harmonies. Standing In for Joe is another one of my favorites. It's another one of the better songs that I've heard from Colin in this era, bouncy and catchy. Wounded Horse, like you said, it's a bit rough. Andy's vocals sound different on it. I do think it suits the song well, but it is definitely a contrast to how he often sounds. So that's one thing that stood out about it. And I like the a contrast of acoustic and electric guitars from the verses to the chorus on Church of Women. I think that the horns as well on the chorus are all very effective. It's just a very rich song. And The Wheel and the Maypole is a great closer for the album and a great way to close everything out for their career. I think it has a big sounding chorus and all the elements work together well. So I do think that this album is more breezy, more poppy than the first Apple Venus, of course. So yes, it is more immediate, but I just like the songs better personally. And I just like this album a bit better, which I realize is very out of step. I just think that there's more variety in the sounds for me, and I like the different styles of songs. Andy has described this album as eclectic, and I think that is very fitting description. And it's a nice note to go out on if they never end up releasing anything else, which it really doesn't look like they will. And I can see why it gets overlooked by people who are bigger fans of their more layered, busy sounding material to my ears. But I think there's more balance here, and that I appreciate. And that element is still present because it's part of who they are, that layered aspect, and that everything but the kitchen sink is kind of still always there, but it's a little more in the background. And I think it lands better for me here than it sometimes does with some other albums. And it was a pleasant surprise for me because, like you said, I didn't have any expectations because people usually have it at the bottom or close to the bottom. So I didn't really think that I would get much out of it, but it was a pleasant surprise. So it's like a moderate 4 stars for me. So it's not you're the top necessarily, but it's not at the bottom either. So
yeah, I really like a lot of the stuff on it. I always thought it was a really cool way to end their career. Nick, I think you feel the same way because we were talking a bit about how much we like it.
Yeah, it's one that really grew on me a lot because I think at the time, so when I got into XTC, it was probably like 2004 or 2003. So this album was like fairly new back then. Like I remember reading a lot about the band, and everyone was like so stoked that they had come back, after all this time. But people were like, well, Apple Venus is a really impressive album. Like this is a really cool pop album. And then they released Wasp Star after it, which sounds like, a bit more generic, especially like if you've heard like Black Sea and stuff, like, what they're capable of doing. And this album is like a little more lightweight, like more focused on, again, like pop music, more like it doesn't have the bite to it that like some of their more guitar oriented albums have. But revisiting it, after all these years and kind of seeing it like in a vacuum, I've begun to appreciate a lot more. In part because like it's interesting what you had mentioned that the production is strangely modern on this album, and I always wondered why that was because as I'd mentioned before, like around the time of like Mummer and Big Express, like they sort of stepped out of time. Like those records don't sound contemporary at all. In fact, like none of their stuff does until this album, which and I assume that's down to who produced it. I remember looking up on Discogs like who's involved with producing and engineering this album, like who is responsible for those drum loops and samples that you brought up. And I don't remember the names, but they were involved with a lot of like 90s alt rock, so that's probably where it comes from. I know like I don't think any of that's on the demos, which you can also hear.
I like that. I like that about it. I know a lot of people don't, but I think it just gives it like a fresh edge that we don't often hear in their music.
Yeah, and it does. Again, it feels like contemporary. Like it should. It's like the story of the band. Like it should have been a big record if like someone else had produced it. Like it sounds like a really great debut record from like an alt rock band, but it's like almost like too good. Like it's too sophisticated in a way, and it's like also kind of jaded.
It kind of reminds me of the band Semisonic, who did Closing Time.
Right. Yeah. No. Semisonic was one of the first. My little brother was really into that band growing up, so that was like one of the first things I thought of. Like, yeah, it sounds like Semisonic, like a good Semisonic album. Yeah, I think. What else was I going to say? There was something I was going to mention about one of the songs here. We're All Light, I think, is a fantastic pop song. I think that should have been a hit. And I think another band, if they had recorded that, it would have been a hit. But like what I find interesting about it is, so I'd mentioned like Apple Venus in a way is like kind of the perfect way to close their career, in that like to me that's Andy Partridge sort of realizing his ultimate form, like kind of cracking the code of like pop music in a way. and making this real like ornate orchestral, like big sounding album. Like, especially the way it ends on the last balloon, like that is like the perfect way for them to go out. But it's like not really a typical way. It's not like typical of the band in a way. Because like you think of that song and like Sacrificial Bonfire, like these big kind of grandiose songs that sort of end things, you know, in a way of like, you know, they both have this sort of death theme, which the last song on this has too. But this ends in a much more like upbeat, like the song "The Wheel and the Maypole" is like another like absolutely perfect pop song. Like again, like that could have been a hit, but it wasn't. And I think like them going out on that is almost like it's almost cooler for them to go out on that song because that song does sound like a lot of XTC's best music. Whereas like The Last Balloon doesn't really sound like anything else they did. It's, you know, kind of somber and depressing. Whereas this song is really like upbeat in a way where it's like, okay, if you like this song, you know, you can get into the rest of their music.
It is a pretty optimistic album. I mean, even Andy's divorce songs kind of come off as kind of chipper, you know?
Yeah, Wounded Horse is funny to me, by the way. Yeah. I know it's not great, but it's the other thing I want to mention, Boarded Up. I always wondered if that song was like a slight at Andy from Colin. Because a lot of that is about how the band is sort of like an antique now, you know? Like they don't go on the road, they don't tour or anything like that. It's, I don't know, I like that song. It's got a good sound to it. So yeah, I gave it 4 stars. And I hate to rush things, but like my kids are at one of their friends' houses, and I think I got to go pick them up soon.
I think that we are actually done. We have covered all 12 XTC albums.
Yeah.
Cool. I didn't know if there was like a wrap up. So I do have to hop off, but I will say one thing. You know, if I could leave with anything that's like cool about this band is that I think the way they grew as people, like from one album to the next, was like it's something that's really fascinating to hear. I want to say to see, but you don't really see them, to hear, because it's something I don't really get out of a lot of modern bands. Where like, you know, they release one album and then like they release, you know, 2-3 years later, they seem to have completely changed by the next album. That like the way they grow as a person and how that reflects on the music. You know, a lot of bands nowadays, they seem to like stick to the same sound and then like evolve within that sound. With XTC, like take a song like Living Through Another Cuba from Black Sea. Like you couldn't even picture them doing a song like that 5 years later on Skylarking, you know? Like they had changed so much and they had evolved so much. And I think that kind of throws some people off because some of their albums are so good, you wonder like, well, why didn't they make more like this? But I think it's like pretty cool that once they like perfected one thing, they just moved on to the next thing, you know, like it or not.
So, like a story.
Yeah, exactly.
Like their story evolving when you listen to their discography.
Right. Yeah, and that whole cycle of like birth to death, like that's such a common theme in their work too. So
yeah, their evolution is really amazing. Anyway, that was the 12 XTC records, and this was a good hang. And I'm gonna put in the description. Vanessa has a great channel that I'm a fan of called It Vee, and Nick, you have your Critter Jams music blog, which I'm gonna link to. And this was a really good hang. I think we covered pretty much all the bases, which is this is a huge. I think we went over 3 hours discussing this band. So,
all right. Well, it's nice to talk to both of you, and hopefully we can do it again.
Yeah. Have a good day.
All right.
Go find my kids now.
Yeah.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. See ya.